Chapter 2, The Traitors Converge. Chapter Text. Prologue. Jonnet Hor D'Ari, Kevin McKidd. Pin page. Jonnet Hor blocked a blow from another traitorous soldier before slicing his throat with his dagger. As much as I am proud to be killing traitors to the realm in the name of the king and to House Targaryen, I should be guarding his grace at the Red Keep, and not Sir Jaime. The boy Lannister should be here, to harden and learn by killing traitors to his king rather than thinking that he is in a position to question his grace. But orders are orders. Jonnet Hor swore a sacred oath to the Seven that he would defend and protect the king and his family from all threats. And he abided by the oath he swore. Since the age of 9 and 10, he swore to obey all orders given to him by his grace the king, her grace the queen or one of their children. It is because of this, both he, Sir Barristan and Lord Commander Hightower were considered to be the only ones amongst Jonnet Hor's sworn brothers whom King Aerys completely trusted. Though as he fought at the Trident, Jonnet Hor wondered how much Lord Commander Hightower would have the trust of his grace now that both he and their sworn brothers Sir Arthur and Sir Oswell were still absent from the war. Jonnet Hor blocked an arrow shot at his shield as he stabbed a common northern soldier in the gut. He let him fall on his back and drew his dagger whilst keeping his shield held up against the next arrow shot at his shield. He waited until the next arrow fired. As it struck his shield, Jonnet Hor looked up at the archer and threw his dagger at him. He nodded grimly as he watched the dagger strike him in the belly, his leathers not protecting his body as he dropped his bow and arrow and fell to his knees. Jonnet Hor ripped his sword out of the gut of the northern traitor's corpse before he looked around for his next traitorous opponent. He blocked the mace of a Stormlands knight as he struck at him from his horse. Jonnet Hor cut his sword at the throat of the horse. The horse neighed and fell on its side, breathing its last as the fall crushed the leg of the rider. Jonnet Hor ran to his side, whom screamed for mercy as Jonnet Hor lifted his sword up high. "No mercy for traitors to the king," he yelled as he impaled him through the neck. After pulling his sword from his neck, Jonnet Hor looked down at his shield and cut across at the two arrows stuck in it. He looked around for more traitors to the king to fell. But then, he heard a thunderous roar from across the field. He could see 3 young men, only a little older than Sir Jaime. Him. He's still alive. And he's come at last to die. The king will be pleased to hear that he is at last dead following his daring escape from the Black Cells, Jonnet Hor thought when he recognized the face of the traitor Brandon Stark, the now Lord of Winterfell. Beside him, was a Stark whom could only be his younger brother, Eddard. The second son of Rickard Stark, whom was ward to the traitor Jon Arryn, whom betrayed his king rather than hand both he and the traitor Robert Baratheon to King's Landing after the execution of Rickard Stark and the escape of Brandon Stark. And then there was the third man, the traitor after whom this rebellion was named. Robert Baratheon, the Lord of Storm's End. Kin to his grace and to Crown Prince Rhaegar, and yet a traitor, nonetheless. But, I suppose, there will always be traitors, especially amongst those whom have blood ties to House Targaryen. First the Black Fyres and now the Baratheons. Robert Baratheon wielded an enormous and blood-stained warhammer, which made Jonnet Hor shiver, just witnessing that hammer strike down a brave knight of House Celtigar, crushing his entire head like a grape with only a single blow. Rhaegar. I will kill you, you fucking raper cunt. You dare to take up arms and accuse your prince of such activities. Your just reward will only ever be death. Jonnet Hor struck down a Vale spearman with an eviscerating slice from his collarbone to his belly before he began to sprint towards the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince is a great warrior, but against such a man, he will need help. Traitor he may be, but with a skill and strength like that, very few could be a match for him. Jonnet Hor watched as the Crown Prince crossed swords with the traitorous Lord of Storm's End. The Crown Prince held his ground well, cutting the Lord of Storm's End twice. But then he struck at the Crown Prince's shield. Jonnet Hor grimaced just watching as the shield fell from his grasp. He could hear the Crown Prince groan in pain from the blow as he pointed his sword at the traitor. He raised his hammer up high at the Crown Prince, roaring ferociously as he did so, striking down at him. The Crown Prince dodged out of the way of the blow, before he sliced across at the Baratheon traitor. He blocked the blow with his arm guard as his hammer struck the blooded soil. He swung his hammer across around, disarming the Crown Prince. No. Not whilst the King's Guard are here. Jonnet Hor charged at the traitor whilst he roared victoriously as he thrusted his hammer at the Crown Prince, denting his breastplate and knocking him to the ground. "Face me, traitor! Face me and die!" Jonnet Hor yelled. He turned around to face Jonnet Hor. "So, bit-dare," he bellowed before he swung at Jonnet Hor. Jonnet Hor dodged his first swing before the second smashed at his shield, knocking it from his grasp. Fuck. Jonnet Hor knew better than to try and block his blows. So, he dodged the next and struck his sword at his elbow. He grunted ferociously as the red blood spilled from his elbow, pouring down his arm and dropping onto the ground. Jonnet Hor, emboldened from his success, sliced across at his helm. Baratheon blocked it with the stave of his hammer. He parried Jonnet Hor's sword across before punching hard at Jonnet Hor's helm. Jonnet Hor yelled out as he fell to the ground, blood spilling from his nose and his helm battered from the powerful punch. He looked up, ready for his death as he looked up at the traitor, lifting his hammer up. But it didn't come. Jonnet Hor saw instead a sword stab him in the back. He looked to see it was the Crown Prince whom wielded the sword. The traitor roared furiously as he dropped his hammer and turned to face the Crown Prince and proceeded to punch him twice before the Crown Prince pulled his sword out and the traitor grunted as he fell to his knees. "Rhaegar. Come and die." "I know that voice," Jonnet Hor thought as he looked up to see Brandon Stark face the Crown Prince, holding the Stark family sword, Ice, with both hands. Jonnet Hor threw his helm down and picked up his sword to help the Crown Prince kill the traitorous Lord of Winterfell, a man he knew was a very skilled swordsman whilst the Crown Prince was tired and injured from his duel with Baratheon. "Lord Brandon, it was never supposed to be like this," said the Crown Prince. "Enough words. Fucking raper. You kidnapped her. You raped her. You murdered my father," he furiously shouted as he wildly struck at the Crown Prince. Jonnet Hor ran to the Crown Prince's side, until his way was blocked by the brother of Brandon Stark, Eddard. Jonnet Hor sliced at Eddard Stark, whom skillfully blocked the blow and parried it across, cutting at Jonnet Hor's pauldron in doing so. He groaned as he looked at his now broken pauldron and saw blood spill from the blow. He lifted his sword to block the next blow. Jonnet Hor managed to block the blow, but he felt the pain of his shoulder wound as he tried to parry. Instead, Eddard Stark swung his sword down onto him again and again, until Jonnet Hor was disarmed. As he looked down at his fallen sword, Stark stabbed him. He groaned and grunted as he fell to his knees. He coughed and spat blood as Stark pulled his sword out. Jonnet Hor looked to the Crown Prince. His sword was cut down by Brandon Stark, whom had thrown down his own sword. He kicked the Crown Prince down and removed his helm before he swung it at the Crown Prince's face. "You kidnapped her." As he screamed, "You raped her," he swung again. "You murdered my father," he roared as he swung a final time. He stopped when he realized that the Crown Prince was unconscious. Jonnet Hor tried to reach for a sword, but ceased as he felt his eyes weaken and he was losing the strength to take up a weapon. "May the Seven strike down you traitors. I have done my duty. And now I rest." Chapter 3, The Red Keep. Chapter text. Brandon I. This fucking wretched city. Where father was murdered. Where the fucking Mad King tried to do the same to me. Well, I shall just show these southerners the cold fury of the north. And show the realm that the Targaryens are naught but lizards. Brandon looked at the iron gate from the hill overlooking the large and stinking city. Gods, this stinks worse than a dead whore, Brandon had thought when he had first rode to King's Landing to find the Crown Prince. "Come out, Rhaegar. Come out and die." Brandon had shouted from the gates, only to be arrested for treason by the Gold Cloaks. Though Brandon was pleased that he had killed 6 Gold Cloaks, including their commander Manly Stokeworth, before he was grabbed by 6 men at once. With Robert healing from his wounds in the Riverlands alongside Jon Arryn and Brandon's good father Hoster, Brandon and Ned lead the northern army of 15,000 to King's Landing. He wanted to personally kill the Mad King for murdering father and cursing the realm with his mad tyrannical reign and the madness of his stupid idiot of a son, whom Brandon and Ned had brought as a prisoner. Even when they threatened to bring him to Roose Bolton, he refused to tell where Lyanna was imprisoned. Brandon grinned as he planned to show Rhaegar his father's corpse before forcing him to tell where Lyanna was. "If Lyanna isn't safe, I will gladly give Rhaegar to Roose Bolton." And once he's done with him, I'll sacrifice him to the old gods, and eviscerate him and hang him from his intestines onto the branches of Winterfell's heart tree. If these stupid Southerners truly think of us as savages, I'll show them just how savage the North can be when the Starks of Winterfell are riled up. Brandon. Look there. Joffrey pointed at the Lion's Gate. There was an army there. An army under the banners of the Golden Lions of Casterly Rock. Lannisters. Do they side with the Mad King? Asked Kyle. Tywin Lannister is an old friend of the Mad King, I have heard it said, Ethan pointed out. But as the Lion Gate opened, Brandon turned around to see the army of the North halt, ready to pounce on the Iron Gate, or on the Lannister army. Brother. Ned said, pointing at the Lannisters. Brandon looked at the Lannister army, to see thousands of them charge inside, and he could hear the sounds of screams and shouts. Fucking Lannister cowards. They choose a side only when we won at the Trident. And now they want to sack the city and murder innocent small folk. And Southerners call us savages. Fucking cowards. Brandon turned to Ned's shadowy Cranogman friend, the Lord of Greywater Watch. Howland, get the Iron Gate opened. We get to the Red Keep and we kill the Mad King, not these Lannister fucks, said Brandon. Howland wordlessly nodded and rode to the Iron Gate, accompanied by a dozen of his men, whilst Ned, Willam Dustin, Mark Ryswell, Jorah Mormont, Roose Bolton, Ricard Karstark, Great Jon Umber, Willis and Wendell Marndale, Galbart and Robert Glover, Gregor Forrester, Helman Tallheart and Meja Sawin rode to Brandon's side. Once Howland gets the gates open, I'll lead the army to take control of the city and force the Lannisters out. We didn't come here to rape and murder defenseless small folk. Whilst I do this, Ned takes the Red Keep. Take the Mad King and his family alive. Don't murder them, it's only the Mad King that dies. I will kill him myself. Lords Karstark, Mormont, Forrester, Dustin and Ryswell, you go with Ned. The rest, come with me, and we'll throw these Lannister cunts out. As they began to ride towards the Iron Gate, Brandon smirked when Howland opened the Iron Gate. Brandon was the first to ride inside. Get to the Red Keep, let nothing stop you. Brandon yelled. Aye, brother. What if Tywin Lannister sent men after the Mad King and his family? Asked Ned. Tell them to fuck off. And if they don't, send their heads to that old fart of a lion. With my love, Brandon replied. Great Jon Umber and Roose Bolton rode alongside Brandon as they lead their men towards the center of the disgusting city. Don't these fucking stupid Southerners know how to build sewers? Growled the Lord of Last Hearth. Breathe deeply, Lord Umber. This is the stench of the South and their Game of Thrones, quietly said the Lord of the Dread Fort. Brandon spotted women being chased by rampaging Lannister soldiers. At the cowards. Brandon commanded as he unsheathed ice and charged towards them. Fucking Lannister cunts. Out of my way. Brandon shouted. The common women ran to the side to avoid Brandon's charging horse before his overhead swing beheaded 3 Westerland soldiers. Well done, Lord Stark. 3 men at once. I'll be sure to do the same, boomed the Great Jon before he beheaded another. Brandon stabbed another before the last fell to the ground when Roose Bolton slit his throat. Slit it with such skill that he collapsed and clutched his still bleeding throat before slowly dying. Brandon turned around to see the Marndale brothers arrive with their men. Sir Willis. Sir Wendell. Coordinate with the City Watch. For now, we work with them to push these cunts out. Lord Umber, take your men and take control of the Mud Gate. Lord Bolton, the Dragon Gate. I'll take control of the Lion's Gate. The rest, spread your men around the city, but any man whom dares harm a single commoner, and they'll be castrated and sent to the wall, ordered Brandon. Brandon led the men of Winterfell and marched towards the Lion's Gate. The rampaging Lannister soldiers hadn't been expecting this, for they were too busy looting, raping and murdering. They tried to fight Brandon's men, but were swiftly killed by the men-at-arms of Winterfell. As the remainder were forced out of the gates, Brandon turned around and looked at the small folk. The raped children and women, their husbands, fathers and brothers tending to them and getting them inside their homes. People of King's Landing, I am Brandon Stark. Keep inside your homes. Bar your doors and do not let any inside. I promise, I will keep you safe. Brandon bellowed at the top of his voice. Brandon climbed off his horse and was accompanied by Ethan, Geoffrey, Kyle and Sir Roderick as they made their way to the gatehouse. He smirked as the gates were shut and barred. As he reached the top, he looked down at the Lannister army helplessly stood there and no way inside. Brandon looked at the gate's towers to see his men tear down the Lannister banners that had been placed there in place of the Targaryen banners. "Set those Lannister rags on fire," he ordered. As they were set on fire, in full view of the Lannister army, Brandon unbuckled his belt and pulled down his trousers before he began to piss on the soil below the walls. "Stupid Lannister fucks. I'll enjoy stuffing this victory in Tywin Lannister's face. Now everything hinges on Ned. Until you die, pin page. Young Rickard Karstark, Dennis Stroy." Rickard ran alongside Jorah and Ned as they were the first to reach the gates of the Red Keep, the castle of this ugly and shit-stinking city. "Is this why the Southerners hate us? Because the North doesn't stink as the South does." Rickard drew his sword and looked up to see the nearest guards were dead. "The Lannisters got here before we did," Ned said. "Willam Dustin." "No. They can't have been here long." "We still have time," Ned replied, hardened with resolve and determination. We will kill the Mad King, avenge Rickard Stark and save young Lyanna. How this war started is further evidence that we should just sever from the rest of the kingdoms. They clearly have never cared for the North and look down on us. Why should we continue to serve ungrateful and stupid Southerners whom despise us? And why would they give a damn about the North being a part of their disgusting kingdom anyway?" Ned led them through the gates and to what could only be Maegor's Holdfast. But as they ran to Maegor's Holdfast, they stopped when Ned halted his sprint. "What is it, Ned?" asked Mark. The answer came when they could hear screams. "Princess Elia and her children. Tywin Lannister ordered for them to die." Ned realized. Forgetting about the Mad King, Ned led them away from Maegor's Holdfast until they reached what were the Red Keep's gardens. When they reached the Red Keep's gardens, Rickard spotted 2 Westerlords leading over a dozen men. They pointed their weapons at what could only be the royal family. Rickard frowned that he could not see the Mad King amongst them. He saw Queen Rolla, a tall and glamorous woman wearing a black and red dress decorated with the sigil of the Targaryens and hiding a boy behind her. Princess Elia, wearing an orange Dornish dress decorated with Martell colors, stood protecting a tiny little girl whilst cradling a little boy. Only 2 knights stood protecting them and 2 handmaidens from the Westerlords and their men. "Dornish whore! You and your brats are mine," shouted the tallest of them. The tallest of them wore black steel plate armor, with a fist protruding from the roof of his helm. He was taller than the Great Jon and wielded a blooded greatsword, almost as large as ice. "No. Get back, sirs. Now," shouted a brave knight pointing his sword at them. "Get them. And then we can have our fun," said the other Westerlord. "Come for us instead, you fucking cowards," roared Ned. Even Rickard was surprised by the furious sound of Ned's voice. "The quiet wolf has bite in him." "Good." The surprised Westerman turned around to face them. "Fuck off, Northerners." "They are ours," said the smaller of the Westerlords. "No. Back off, now." Ned threatened as he held up his great sword and pointed it at that one, whilst Rickard faced the large brute of a Westerlord, whom wore the 3 hounds sigil of House Clegane in his breastplate. "Fine. I'll rape each of them with your fucking blood on my hands," roared Clegane. Rickard held up his bastard sword and shield as he thought of how to kill Clegane. Clegane swung his enormous sword down at him clumsily. Rickard dodged the blow and sliced at his helm. Clegane's helm fell down and Rickard grinned at seeing his blood fall from his furious face. He swung again at Rickard. Rickard laughed when the blade struck into a nearby tree. Rickard yelled out, "Carhold! House Karstark," with pride as he struck at Clegane. His blow hit him just where he wanted. At his right kneecap. Though he wore greaves, the blow had cut through the chainmail at the back and blood spilled from there. Clegane furiously smashed his great sword down onto him. Rickard maneuvered out of the way and sliced his bastard sword across at his right knee again. He dodged back as Clegane screamed hatred as he charged towards him, his great sword above his head. But as he took a step towards the Lord of Carhold, his badly wounded leg gave way and he collapsed down onto his face, smashing it on the marble tiles. Ricard stood behind him and stabbed him through the back and stabbed him through his skull, until the tip of his sword poked out a handbreadth through his mouth. Ricard ripped his sword from the dead giant before he looked up to see Ned behead the other Westerlord, whom wore a tabard decorated with a manticore on his breastplate. Their men had been killed by the Northerners and by the 2 knights whom protected the Targaryens. Ned turned to Jorah. "Protect them. Let no harm come to them. Lord Karstark. Willam. Mark. On me," said Ned. Jorah, wielding a blooded long claw, accepted his orders and stood with Theoval, Martin and Jory Castle and Gregor Forrester to protect the Targaryens. "Ned," called Princess Elia. "Ned. How the fuck does she know Ned? Oh, does she know the Dornish woman he married? Ashara Dane." "Princess Elia," asked Ned. "What is going on out there?" she asked. "Tywin Lannister was sacking the city, but has since been stopped by my brother. He works with the City Watch to hold the city from the Lannister army." "And how can we trust you will not do the same to my queen?" asked one of the knights, whom they had fought alongside just a moment ago. "Because unlike they, I still hold on to my honor, sir. And I will never let go of it, even in pursuit of something as fleeting as power or wealth," said Ned. "Well said, Ned," Ricard thought as Princess Elia whispered to Queen Rolla. "What of my son, Lord Stark? Where is Rhaegar?" she demanded, as though the Targaryens were not in the wrong. In spite of that, Ricard admired how she spoke, with such resolve and inner strength. A true dragoness. She is a queen when her brother and husband is neither dragon nor king. He lives. Brandon and I keep him that way so that he will tell us where he hides my sister, Ned replied furiously. Ricard, Willam and Mark followed after Ned as they ran inside the Red Keep. They could hear the shouting of a man, followed by a mad and manic laugh. Only one who that could be. The traitors fight each other. What fucking fools. But traitors they still are. Rossart, follow your orders. Burn them all. Burn them all. Burn them all. Let the traitors rule from the ashes. But none in the throne room expected it when they stormed inside from a side door. What the? Ricard scornfully laughed when he looked at a young and golden-haired knight in Kingsguard armor stand guarding the king. He looked the same age as Lyanna. Jaime Lannister. What the fuck was Tywin Lannister thinking, attacking this city with his son a Kingsguard? Ricard walked up to the surprised Lannister boy and punched him hard on his face whilst Ned grabbed Aes the Mad from the Iron Throne. Jory punched him in the eye as he tried to draw his sword before Jory took his golden sword. Ricard punched Lannister's face once again, knocking him out. Burn them all. Burn them all, he screamed at a few robed men. Ricard turned from the Lannister boy he knocked out and looked at the 3 men the Mad King shouted at. But they were cut down by Mark and Willam before they could carry out what orders he had given them, whilst Jory and Martin held on to the Mad King, whom was forced on his knees. Ned looked down on the madman, whom truly disgusted Ricard. His hair and beard were long and greying. And his fingernails and toenails were long also. And they call us savages. Elia never let her children out of her sight as they were led inside the throne room. In spite of Ned and the Northerners protecting them closely, Sir Alisa and Sir Jaime kept close guard of them. She reacted sharply every time she heard someone with heavy footsteps walk behind her, as she remembered how the Lannister murderers came to rape and murder her, Rolla, Miria and Lara. But as they were in the throne room, Elia recognized the corpses of the alchemists whom Aes had sponsored so much. And then there was Sir Jaime, disarmed and knocked out as he was dragged away from the throne room by a young Northerner, only a few years younger than Ned. Do they truly have Rhaegar prisoner? If so, I hope to confront him and let him know that it was actions that nearly cost my life, the lives of his children, his mother, his brother and his newly born sister. But she watched as Lord Willam Dustin and Lord Ricard Karstark grab Aes and drag him, screaming burn them all. She turned to Ned, whom held onto a blooded greatsword, and looked at the sorry excuse of a king being led away. All I wanted was to bring my sister home. Not this, he muttered. Ned, she whispered. He turned around to face her. Princess, he said. Come now, Ned. We know each other well enough that you may call me Elia, she said. Elia, he replied. I know where she is being held. It took Ned a moment to realize what she said. Where? Where is she? He demanded, his soft and quiet voice replaced with an impatient anger. In Dawn. I learned from my spies that Roriger keeps her in a tower in Starfall Lands, called the Tower of Joy, she explained. Ned nodded once before turning to the throne room doors. I must go, he muttered. Ned, wait. Ned turned around to face her again, impatiently. Why? He asked. She is guarded by Arthur, Oswell and Drold Hightower. I'll give you a letter to give to them, assuring them of our safety and that you can be trusted, she explained. He nodded and Elia continued. What does Brandon intend to do? She asked. Hold the city until order is restored and the future is decided for the realm, he replied. You mean, Robert Baratheon as king? She asked accusingly. Ned frowned at the mention of his best friend. Robert is dying. Dying. Roriger backstabbed him at the Trident, he explained. That may yet change things. For the better. Ned, tell Brandon I wish to speak with him in the throne room as soon as he can. If there is to be order in the realm, it has to be done with words rather than swords, she said. I will. But Aerys dies. As does Roriger, when Lyanna comes home, Ned replied angrily as he stormed away. 7. Give me the wisdom and strength I need to face the rebels and the evil bastard who sent Clegane and Lorne, Tywin Lannister. If Aegon is to be king, I need to convince the Lords Paramount to bend to him and to me for a regency. Roriger can never be a king. That is clear in how he focused more on his dreams and prophecies than on the realm itself. The king must be Aegon. Chapter 4, The Wolf's Vengeance. Chapter text. Brandon 2. Brandon grinned at how every messenger Tywin Lannister had sent had been told to fuck off. You have clearly shown you are an untrustworthy man. So why the fuck should I let you inside the city when your men have been raping, looting and murdering across the city? How many Lannister dead is there? Brandon asked Roose Bolton. 600, my lord. A further 500 were wounded and taken prisoner. What is to be done with them? Asked the Lord of the Dread Fort. Throw their corpses over the walls for the Lannisters to see. It's their mess, so they can clear it all up. As for the prisoners, have them put out all fires and repair all damages they caused to the city. Then we'll send them to the wall, said Brandon. Brandon. Home. Brandon asked as he turned to Ethan. It is Lord Eddard, he said, pointing at the road leading to the Lion's Gate. And being escorted by Rickard Karstark, Jorah Mormont, Jory and Martin Castle was a royal wheelhouse. This better be good news, Ned. Brother. I've brought 2 prisoners. The Mad King and his last Kingsguard, Jaime Lannister, Ned called. Good work, Ned. Sure enough, Jory opened the wheelhouse door, and dragged out the bruised Lannister boy and him. The man whose mere visage haunted Brandon's dreams since that night. Whose cruel cackle, Brandon could hear whenever he thought of that day or when someone said how sorry they were for what happened. Whose words burn him. Brandon wanted nothing more than to burn him alive for what he did to father and what he tried to do him and his friends. Sir Wendell, bring Roriger. I want him to see this, said Brandon. Yes, my lord, said Sir Wendell before he took his horse to bring their important prisoner. Ned walked up the steps of the gateway to meet Brandon. We weren't the only ones whom got to the Red Keep, said Ned. Whom else? Asked Roose Bolton. Amory Lorne and Gregor Clegane, 2 of Tywin Lannister's thugs. We caught them in the Red Keep's gardens, where they had tried to rape and murder the Queen, Princess Elia, her handmaidens and their children, said Ned. Fucking Tywin Lannister. You have gone too fucking far this time. I really want to behead you with ice, alongside your old friend. Brandon's attention switched from his brother to the walls where he could see Lord Bolton's men, grinning and laughing as they did so, as they began to throw the corpses of the Lannister soldiers over the walls. Perhaps we should follow the example of Theon Stark and line the walls of the city with their heads. And Princess Elia gave me valuable news, Ned continued. What news? Brandon asked when he saw Sir Wendell arrive with Roriger, whose face was covered with a hood. She told me where Lyanna is. A solitary tower in Starfall Lands in Dawn called the Tower of Joy. She gave me a letter with a command from her and Queen Rolla for Arthur, Oswell Went and Drold Hightower to return to King's Landing, Ned explained. Good. Well, that saves us time from giving him to Roose Bolton. I wonder what his reaction will be when I mention this tower in Dawn. Though I do have a few words to share with Hightower personally when he gets here. You know the way to this tower? Asked Brandon. I can take a few men and get there within a moon, perhaps 2, said Ned. Take 10 men. Leave through the mud gate. Get Howland to sneak you across in fishing boats, said Brandon. Oh, and Princess Elia and Queen Rolla says they want to speak with you in the throne room as soon as you can, said Ned. Brandon nodded and replied, I'll go when I'm sure the Lannisters don't come up with any more clever ideas. Good luck, Ned. Good luck, brother, said Ned before they hugged. Ned left with Howland Reed, Martin and Jory Castle, Jorah Mormont and Willam Dustin, and they rode to the mud gate. What is to be done with the prisoners, my lord? Asked the lord of the Dread Fort. Brandon looked down at Roriger, whose hood was removed. He blinked several times due to the intense sunshine and looked at his father being brought before Brandon. Roriger frowned as he looked around at the northern soldiers holding him captive. What would you suggest, my Lord Bolton? Brandon asked. Remove the Mad King's head and send it to Tywin Lannister, with Jaime Lannister as the messenger. Along with the heads of his bannermen Clegane and Lorque, he suggested. Brandon smirked as he nodded. He turned to see Rickard Karstark's men were bringing the corpses of Clegane and Lorque and their men. Bring up the Mad King, he ordered 2 of his men. As they did so, Brandon unsheathed ice from its scabbard. Ethan, remove the heads off of Lorque and Clegane and put them in a box, Brandon ordered his squire. As Ethan ran to find a box, the Mad King was forced on his knees. In the name of Rickard of House Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, I, Brandon of House Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, do sentence you to die. If you have any final words, speak them now, or forever be at peace, Brandon furiously said as he glared down at the Mad King. He snarled at Brandon. Coward. You fled like a fucking coward whilst your father burned and died, he said with a malicious grin. Says the coward whom broke guest right and murdered him, your own vassal, snapped Meja Sawin, one of father's best friends. Brandon lifted ice up high and sliced it down on him. That was for you, father. You are avenged. Brandon spat on his severed head. He looked to see Ethan bring a box, already filled with the heads of Clegane and Lorque. Gods, what a pair of ugly cunts. Only to be joined by yet another ugly cunt. Brandon kicked the head away from the corpse before picking it up by the hair and throwing it in the box. Bring Roriger up here, said Brandon. He kicked the headless corpse from the walls and onto the ground below. Brandon took a cloth from his pocket and began to clean ice of the worm's blood. Get it over with, Stark, I have done my part, said the Targaryen scum with pride, as though he was a willing sacrifice for the greater good. Brandon raised a brow as he looked up at the former crown prince. Ned was right. He's obsessed with prophecies and thinks he is the hero of a story that will be told for centuries. Beg pardon, your grace, my king. I am so sorry for your father's untimely death and that you never had the chance to say any final words to him, Brandon said mockingly. Roriger frowned furiously as he tried to wrestle from the grips of Brandon's men. In front of these very walls, I challenged you. Shouting Roriger. Roriger. Come out and die. But you weren't there, you fucking coward. You were too busy imprisoning and raping my sister. Now, if you think you know how I felt that day, then think again, you fool. I was forced to watch as your father gave the order for my father to burn from wildfire. He had a strangulation device tied around my neck, telling me to take up a sword and rescue my father. But I didn't, because I knew that I would die if I did. I was forced to watch and listen as my father was murdered right before my own eyes, and I couldn't do a fucking thing about it, snapped Brandon. Roriger grimaced at Brandon's descriptions before Brandon decided to piss him off and see his reactions. Alas, it is a pity that my brother Ned couldn't be here to see the justice. Though he did have his fun in the Red Keep in taking him, said Brandon. Roriger just glared at him in confusion as he spoke. Wait now. I'm just getting to the good part. Oh, didn't I say? Ned couldn't be here because he is on his way to Dawn. Not merely to his beautiful wife in Starfall, the lovely Ashura Dane, but also to a place called the Tower of Joy. Have you heard of it? This time, his eyes opened wide in realization and shock. Struck a nerve, did I? No. 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 Roriger screamed, trying to wrestle from Brandon's men holding him. For fuck's sake, put him on his knees. Brandon ordered as he rolled his eyes. They did as they were told, though he continued to try and resist. How are those ropes, brave and heroic king? You can't fulfill your prophecies by being so tied up. Maybe you aren't so heroic after all. Have you considered that? Asked Brandon with an amused grin as he innocently shrugged his shoulders. He can't. He cannot. She will give me my third child. My Visnya. The song of fire and ice must be fulfilled, he screamed in desperation as though Brandon understood all of what he was saying. Gods, he truly is fucking mad. I can't believe they actually thought he was a safer alternative than his father. Brandon shut him up with a powerful punch to his face. Brandon. Jaime Lannister awakens, said Joffrey. Brandon turned from a now groaning and bleeding Roriger as Brandon's punch had split his lip. Jaime Lannister awoke from his short slumber and looked around at the Stark soldiers surrounding him. Ethan, give him the box with the heads and tell them to deliver it to his father personally. I will go to the Red Keep and meet the few remaining sane Targaryens, said Brandon. Brandon was about to walk down the steps until he stopped, noticing the fuming Roriger, still futilely trying to escape. Lord Bolton, said Brandon, gesturing for him to come closer. He did as he was bid and Brandon whispered. Make sure to tell Roriger what almost became of his family. I'm sure they won't be grateful to him for what almost became of them if not for my brother, said Brandon. It would be a pleasure, my lord, said Roose Bolton, with a mere semblance of an evil grin on his pale face. I'm sorry I have to miss this. Brandon took his horse and rode to the Red Keep. Is this how Cregan Stark felt when he had to clean up the shit the Blacks and the Greens had left in the wake of the Dance of the Dragons? If the Targaryens are to stay on the Iron Throne, they cannot have incest anymore. It does nothing but make them mad, stupid, or both. Elia too. Sir Jaime returned with the remainder of the City Watch officers whom had worked alongside the Stark army to restore order in the city and push the Lannister army out, but they had still kept to their oaths to house Targaryen. Whilst Sir Alisa kept a close guard of Rhaenys, Aegon, Daenerys and Viserys in a hidden chamber shown to them by Varys, Elia and Roller issued commands from the throne room. How many men can you bring to the Red Keep in case of another attack? Either by Lannisters or Starks, asked Roller. 300 men loyal to the Iron Throne, my queen, replied Sir Uthor Celtigar. Bring them at once to the Red Keep and have them garrison all places they can enter from. None enter or leave without your knowing of it, Sir Uthor Elia ordered. Yes, my princess, he replied, bowing his head as he did so. But as he, Sir Jaime and a dozen other officers of the Gold Cloaks were about to leave to do as they were commanded, another entered the throne room. Elia recognized him immediately from the last time he entered the throne room, defiant and full of anger as he had foolishly challenged Roriger. Queen Roller. Princess Elia, he greeted them with scorn. You will bow to them, you northern savage. One of those Gold Cloak officers was punched and beaten by the Lord of Winterfell. From a single punch, he had fallen to the ground and was punched an additional 3 times before he stopped. Brandon Stark looked around at the other Gold Cloak officers. Does anyone else think me a stupid northern savage? None dared to say anything as he looked around at each of them, darkly glaring at them. Fuck off, southern shits, he muttered before they finally left, Sir Jaime helping his comrade up from the floor, with a bleeding face. You summoned me, he asked. We did, said Roller. Brandon Stark looked around in a deep anger, his eyes stopping at where his father was burnt and then at where he had been strangled. Elia could see how his hands curled into fists as his head faced the 2 places. Where are my father's remains? He demanded. Elia shivered at the coldness in his voice. It's complicated, Elia tried to say. He snapped around to face them both. Just fucking tell me, he snapped. All that is left is a few bones. I had them saved so that they might be buried in Winterfell once this was all over, said Roller. Brandon nodded slowly, with a calmness slowly spreading over his face. He's dead. Your husband's head is by now rotting in Tywin Lannister's tent along with Clegane's and Lorca's, said the Lord of Winterfell. He's dead. How did he die? Asked Roller. I chopped his head off, as is the old way of the first men, he replied. An ancient tradition, Roller pointed out, thinking of all good Queen Alysanne did to outlaw the traditions of the first men. It is considered honorable and dutiful to do so. But of course, I had no idea that burning people alive with wildfire is now the new way of the South, he replied with an unpleasant glare. What point is he trying to make? That the first men were less barbaric than Aes. Lord Brandon, I am sorry for what happened to you and to your father and what has become of your sister. But neither I nor my good mother are at fault for his crimes or that of my husband, said Elia. Turning to her, Brandon Stark smiled slightly. Ned told him. He must have already left. I lost my father in this very throne room. I was a fool to challenge your raper of a husband outside the walls, I know that. But I want to make this clear, Princess Elia, Queen Rulla. If my sister is dead because of what Roriger did, I will be very tempted to hand him to my bannerman, Lord Bolton, before I personally sacrifice him to the old gods in the old way, by tying him to a heart tree, suspended by his guts, he said. I think even Oberyn would blanch at such a description, Elia thought as she shivered at the thought, even for her husband. What do you want, Lord Stark? Asked Rulla. To restore order in this city and the realm. But, not at the cost of more Northerners or more of my family. Robert Baratheon is dying, in case Ned hadn't told you. Should he survive, he may not press his claim anymore, now that Roriger is our prisoner and that Aegon is safe. But, because of my brother, I am willing to hear you both out. What? Hear us out, asked Elia. I know that you will press for either your husband or your son to be king. If your husband tries to become king, I will subject him to all of what I described before. So, I am interested to hear you as to why I should back another Targaryen to the Iron Throne or follow my bannerman's suggestions. And of what do your bannermen speak? Asked Rulla. Since this war began and my brief return to the north, many of my bannermen have suggested that the north should return to the days of independence. Saying that they have lost kin and friends in this war and how the south and the southerners have brought nothing but harm to the north. And because of all that my family has suffered, I am inclined to agree. You southerners have always looked down on the north, and your man only 5 minutes ago named me, the Lord of Winterfell and Lord Paramount of one of the 7 kingdoms, a savage. I find it hard to disagree with them on these points. Especially when House Stark has been taken for granted for so long. My father wanted to try and integrate the North with the South, and his reward. Murdered, by the king he swore an oath to. He's right. With all of that in mind, it is not surprising that the Northerners would consider independence. Damn you, Roriger. Damn your fucking prophecies for bringing this world of wildfire onto your family and your house. Lord Stark, I understand that your bannermen and you in particular have no reason to hold any love nor respect for House Targaryen, but if you let me make my case for my son's claim, I will grant you any requests you want. Allow me the chance to speak to your bannermen and to you, once all the more important lords of the 7 kingdoms come here for talks, said Elia. He raised a brow, but Elia noticed how he seemed interested in what she was saying. When? As soon as your brother returns from Dorne, she replied. He hummed before nodding just once. My queen. Princess Elia, he said, bowing his head. A small victory. But a victory nonetheless. Lord Stark. Where is my son? Asked Rulla. He smirked as he looked at Rulla. Being entertained by Lord Bolton, my queen, he replied. Entertained? Asked Elia. Knowing what I do about the Boltons, that makes me concerned. Before you ask, he is not being tortured on a flaying rack, unfortunately. I merely told Lord Bolton to inform him of what almost became of you both and your families at the hands of Tywin Lannister's thugs. Lord Bolton enjoys use of torture in words as well as torture in his tools, he replied. I'm sure. Not that I am complaining. Roriger should know full well of what almost became of us. And all because of him. I will send a raven to the Tullys and Arryns coming into the Crown Lands by now and inform them of the situation in the capital, said Brandon Stark. He left the throne room. Well, that could have gone worse, said Elia. Yes. But you did well. The North may yet stay on side, said Rulla as they walked to the King's Solar. The Vale will be swayed. Jon Arryn is a reasonable man. Doran will come to our side. Hoster Tully and Mace Tyrell are both greedy men and will want something that benefits them from this, said Elia. Rulla nodded as they looked at a map of the 7 kingdoms. In spite of the stories that Quarian Greyjoy is trying to reform the Ironborn, he is old and is said to be dying. I doubt he will show much interest in coming, Elia continued. And that leaves out the Baratheons and the Lannisters, said Rollo, whom snarled at the very mention of the Lannisters. Whether or not Robert dies, the Baratheons will want compensation for what they have suffered. Mace Tyrell has been idly besieging and starving Storm's End for a year now. Like the Lannisters, that may be waiting for a victor to strike. Tywin sacked the city and sent his men after us as a gift to Robert when he learnt of the Battle of the Trident. Once he realizes that he is alone, he will have no choice but to submit to our authority on Aegon's behalf, said Elia. Now, I need to follow Brandon Stark's example and write letters to Sunspear, Highgarden and Pike. Even though the Greyjoys are unlikely to accept, it is still custom. Chapter 5, The Fate of the Realm. Chapter text. Interlude 2, Photo, Brana Marquezine foi alvoda criticas por sua atuação na novela deus Savo Rii, Pure People. Young Ashura Dane, Brana Marquezine. Ashura beamed when she saw Arthur and Ned ride through towards Starsword Hall. She ran down the steps to greet them, though she halted when she saw the saddened looks of them both. Ned. Arthur, she called. They both looked up and beamed at seeing her. Hello, little sister, said Arthur before he hugged her. Ned hugged her and held her tightly before kissing her all over her face. Gods, I've missed you, he said. And are you, she replied as she kissed him on the lips. Ned, what happened, she asked. Lyanna, she's dead. She died giving birth to a stillborn son, he replied. Oh, Ned, my love, I'm so sorry, said Ashura before she hugged him and held him tightly. First his father and now his sister. Gods, he almost lost his brother. As they broke from the hug and sat down together, Ashura decided to change the subject. Elia sent a letter. She told me what you did, she said. Ned just nodded and made a simple statement. It was the right thing to do. Something I will never regret, he replied. And that's one of the many reasons why I love you. Most men would boast of such a thing and demand that songs be sung about them for doing that. But not you. Never you, my Ned. Did Princess Elia say anything in the letter about events in the capital, my lady? Asked Sidrold. Yes. She sent ravens to the Lord Paramount to come to King's Landing to discuss a regency for Prince Aegon, she explained. As is right, said Sidrold with an approving nod. What of the king? Asked Sir Oswell. He is dead. Brandon Stark beheaded him on the Lion's Gate. Rhaegar lives, but is being kept in the Black Cells, said Ashura. Both Arthur and Oswell looked upset at the news of Rhaegar. He brought all of this on himself, and you did not do a thing to stop him nor advise him to do otherwise. Don't either of you forget that the lives of thousands are on your hands as much as they are on Rhaegar's, Ashura said with a glare at them. All three of them slowly and sadly nodded, seemingly realizing that. Ned. Come, said Ashura. She took his hand and led him upstairs to the nursery. Since her eldest brother, Lord Aron Dane, had died of Greyscale, Ashura had now become Lady of Starfall. She and Ned had married soon after the tourney of Harrenhal, and now that the war was soon to end, she and Ned would rule Starfall together. Our first child, she said, leading him to a cradle holding their son, John. John Dane, she said proudly. Ned beamed as he bent down at their son, fast asleep. Hello, John, he whispered. How is he? He asked, turning back to her. He is well, she replied. And you, Ash? Are you well? Ned asked, holding her hands as he said it. It always warmed Ashura's heart with how Ned deeply cared for her and loved her, treating her like she was the most valued and most important part of his life, and not some whore to bed and pay to leave, or simply as a broodmare to breed more sons and daughters for their noble house. I am well. More so for seeing you, and you at last coming to Starfall, she said as they left the nursery. Ned beamed before he leant in and they shared a long and deep kiss. Ashura felt her heart race as he wrapped his large and muscular arms around her and pulled her in for the kiss. She stroked his face with one hand and ran her other down his back as she held the kiss. Gods, I love you, Ned. Sister. Ashura. Ashura and Ned broke the kiss when they heard the voice of Ashura's younger sister, Illyria. Illyria. Here, Ashura called. Illyria, aged 12, joined them, surprised at seeing Ned. Illyria, dearest sister, this is Ned Stark, my husband, said Ashura. Lord Stark. Oh, welcome to Starfall, said Illyria with such perfect poise and ladylike manners, Ashura felt Mother would be proud. An honor to be welcomed as such, Lady Illyria, Ned replied before he kissed Illyria's hand. Was there something wrong, Illyria? Asked Ashura. Yes, Arthur says that they will leave tomorrow, she explained. Ashura turned to Ned, whom nodded. Then we will leave also. Elia and Brandon will need our help in the capital, said Ned. Yes, they will. Especially with evil scum such as Tywin Lannister in the capital. Interlude 3, Elyon X. Rhaegar Targaryen, Charlize Theron. The headless remains of Aerys were buried in the catacombs of the Great September of Baelor. You drove the realm to madness, Aerys. Madness, death and senseless destruction. Was any of it worth it? I just give thanks to the seven that Viserys, Daenerys, Rhaenys and Aegon will not grow up under your thumb. Rhaegar proudly looked on at Elia as she stood in front of the Lords Paramount, gathered in the small council. Elia was sat at the king's seat and Rhaegar was sat on the hand seat as she looked at the Lords Paramount whom had come. Brandon Stark of Winterfell. Hoster Tully of Riverrun. Jon Arryn of the Eyrie. Stannis Baratheon of Storm's End after the death of his brother. Mace Tyrell of Highgarden. Doran Martell of Sunspear and Elia's brother. And Tywin Lannister. Quarian Greyjoy had died in a glorified raid on the Reach after the Battle of the Trident, but his eldest son, Balon, had not sent a reply to the invite, and so they began without him. My lords, you have my thanks for coming. Now, I would like to begin with my apologies on behalf of my husband and my late father for starting this war with the kidnapping of Lyanna Stark and the subsequent murder of Lord Rickard Stark, said Elia. At this, Rhaegar glanced at the Lord of Winterfell and the man whom had ended Aerys' torments of Rhaegar. Brandon Stark grimly looked at Elia as she mentioned the deaths of his father and his sister. She was glad that they had since moved Rhaegar into the Black Cells ever since she and Elia had reached an understanding with him. Otherwise, she feared he would have kept his word and tortured him to death. Rhaegar and Elia agreed for him to be sent to the wall once this was over. Now, I would speak of my son's claim to the Iron Throne, said Elia. A claim which House Martell shall back, said Doran without hesitation. Rhaegar glanced around at the assembled lords. And why should we, princess? What's to say that your son will not become another man like your husband or your good father, asked Hoster Tully. Because he will be raised as a king should be raised, Lord Tully. But, having said that, you are not like your ancestor, Edim Tully, whom quickly surrendered to Aegon the Conqueror as opposed to fighting for his king, Harrenhal, said Elia. Rhaegar grinned slightly at that and looked at her good daughter proudly. Princess Elia, what of the doctrine of exceptionalism? The incest shared between Targaryen kings and queens have led to nothing good, wisely said Jon Arryn. The doctrine of exceptionalism has been in place since the founding of Westeros as a united nation, Rhaegar pointed out. And yet, your grace, House Arryn has ruled the Vale for thousands of years since the coming of the Andals. House Martell has ruled Dorne for centuries before Aegon's conquest and retained their rule over Dorne in spite of 5 wars House Targaryen fought against Dorne, including back when House Targaryen were in possession of dragons. And House Stark has ruled the North for 8,000 years, said Jon Arryn. He has a point, Rhaegar had to concede, though she disliked even glancing at the stone-faced Lord of Casterly Rock sat next to him. What would Joanna think of you if she was here now, Rhaegar wondered, remembering her old friend and former handmaiden, alongside Cassandra Baratheon and Miriam Martell. Rhaegar turned to Elia. You speak true, Lord Arryn. The small council, the Queen Dowager and I shall consider the future the doctrine holds in the realm and the future of House Targaryen, said Elia. It would be best if we allowed marriages between Lords Paramount and House Targaryen, and certify their allegiance to us. And whom shall be in the new small council, princess? Asked Tywin Lannister. Rhaegar furiously glared at Tywin. Rhaegar had heard that whilst Brandon Stark had barred Tywin from entering the city with his army, he had tried to treat with him until he had sent Jaime with the infamous box of heads. Tywin was said to have smiled when he looked at the head of Aerys, but was infuriated at seeing the heads of Clegane and Lorque. Shall be chosen from amongst those whom I deem to be best suited to a position in the small council, Lord Lannister, said Elia. She spoke with a ferocious glare at Tywin as she spoke, and spoke with such inner strength and resolve, which Rhaegar was proud of her for. None would be better suited as Queen Regent than you, my dear. We'll get to what you should pay in compensation for all that you have done and all that you tried to do, but later. All houses which have suffered as a result of the rebellion and the tyranny that preceded it will be compensated. But, Lord Lannister, I hardly think that you are in a position to talk of the small council and power, when you had waited the entire war without joining a side until after the Trident before attacking this very city under the guise of friendship. Rolla smirked. Brandon Stark, Stannis Baratheon, Hoster Tully, Doran Martell, Jon Arryn and Mace Tyrell all glared at Tywin for this. He remained quiet before Stannis Baratheon spoke. My princess, you spoke of compensations for the houses which suffered most. What are they? What did you have in mind, Lord Baratheon? She asked. That House Tyrell pay in gold and food to House Baratheon for daring to starve us for an entire year, he replied with a dark glare matching the Baratheon fury as he turned to Mace Tyrell. An entire year he held Storm's End. Impressive, and for a boy of 9 and 10. The new Lord of Storm's End was unnaturally thin from the starvation he, his men and his people were forced to endure from Mace Tyrell's besiegement. I was but doing as I was bid by order of the king, the Lord of Highgarden maintained. Gods, where is his mother to do the talking for him? And yet, starvation. Rather than attacking Storm's End. For an entire year. Stannis demanded. All houses will be considered for compensation, based on whom of their families they lost and what they suffered, Lord Baratheon. The crown shall bear all costs, and not House Tyrell. Does this suit you? It does not, princess. For it was House Tyrell that did the foul deed, he replied. And yet, it was House Targaryen whom gave the order. Just as it was Rhaegar whom struck down Robert at the Battle of the Trident, and it was Rhaegar whom kidnapped a noblewoman betrothed to the Lord of Storm's End and House Baratheon. It was House Tyrell that besieged and starved Storm's End, true, Lord Baratheon, but it was King Aerys whom gave the command, said Rolla. He grumbled as he nodded, as though tempted to challenge Mace Tyrell to a duel. The Lord of Highgarden looked pleased that he and his house would not have to pay compensation. Cheap fool. And a coward, starving innocent small folk for an entire year and not taking further part in the war. After Ashford, House Tyrell proved it was about as useful as a fifth wheel on a wheelhouse. And what say you, my Lord Stark? Asked Elia. His bannermen still speak of northern independence. Rolla remembered from Varys' investigations on each of the Lords Paramount and what their bannermen spoke of since their arrival in the Red Keep. We will have to tread this carefully if we are to convince them to stay within the realm. If the North becomes independent, then the Iron Islands and Dorne will clamor for independence. And the realm will crumble and thousands more will die. I keep an open mind, Princess Elia. My bannermen have spoken aplenty on northern independence, amongst themselves and with me. Now, I want to make it abundantly clear that I have no interest in being king in the north, unless it is required of me or unless all of my bannermen are unanimous in wanting it. Many of them do want it. But I promised my brother and my good sister that I would hear you out, he explained. Thank the gods for Eddard Stark and Usher Dane, thought Rolla. Brandon Stark may very well be the one we must convince the most. He defeated Jon Connington at Stony September, Rhaegar at the Trident, took Rhaegar prisoner, captured the city, pushed the rampaging Lannister forces from the city and beheaded Aerys. The small folk call him the Avenging Wolf, whilst his younger brother had become the Heroic Wolf. House Stark and House Baratheon both have suffered the most from this war and shall be compensated appropriately. And, I would also return the lands of the new gift to the north, for Queen Alysanne had taken them without consent, nor was compensation given, and the land was given to the Night's Watch unfairly. It is true that the north has been looked down upon by the south and by House Targaryen, but that is something I hope to change, she said. The return of the lands of the new gift seemed to have been the right thing to say, from how he looked. The north will support King Aegon, said the Lord of Winterfell with a nod. After that, it had gone just as Rolla had thought. As will the Vale, said Jon Arryn. And Dorne, added Doran Martell. The Reach has always been loyal to House Targaryen and shall continue to be so, said Mace Tyrell, sounding like a lickspittle as he said so. The Riverlands will support King Aegon, said Hoster Tully. That just left Tywin Lannister and Stannis Baratheon. Stannis Baratheon looked around at those whom had spoken before his eyes rested on Elia. He nodded before saying the Stormlands shall fully support King Aegon. As will the Westerlands, said Tywin Lannister. Chapter 6, A Less Than Fond Farewell. Chapter Text. Elia 3. Thank the seven, Elia thought as she spoke individually with each of the lords paramount in the king's solar. She was grateful to Brandon for being the one whose decision to support Aegon had been the one to turn the others into supporting him. House Stark shall receive 500,000 gold dragons, the lands of the new gift, as well as permission to rebuild Moat Cailin and Wolf's Den and create new houses of the north, but once formal documents have been written and signed by either myself or Aegon, when he comes of age, said Elia as she finished writing the relevant documents. She looked up at Brandon as she finished. I am sorry to say that I cannot convince all the South that the Northerners are not savages, Lord Stark. You have nothing to apologize for, Queen Regent, he replied. She nodded gratefully that he was willing to listen to her. Can I convince you to enter the small council? Asked Elia. Your Grace, in the time I have spent as Lord of Winterfell, I have spent 12 days of it at home in Winterfell. I wish to be back home in the north and to raise my children as Northerners and not as Southerners. It may be best if Aegon is to wed a daughter of Brandon and Catelyn Tully, to tie the North to the Iron Throne and make up for the Pact of Fire and Ice not being honored by the Blacks after the Dance of the Dragons, and in doing so, would also tie the Riverlands. When he is to be crowned, every noble vulture with a daughter will be riding to King's Landing. Aegon cannot wed a Tyrell or a Lannister. I refuse to reward their lack of help nor their ambitions becoming more a priority than their loyalty, Elia thought after they had reached an agreement on Rhaegar's fate. Next, she met with Stannis Baratheon, whom grumbled as she told him that House Baratheon would receive 500,000 gold dragons and House Tyrell would pay a tribute of food to compensate for starvation of Storm's End, free of charge. Elia was glad to have the support of Oberyn and Doran when they met with her, and Oberyn vowed to stay in King's Landing to help, which she gratefully accepted and named him as Master of Laws. She had also decided to name Jon Arryn as Hand of the King, for his nephew and heir, Elbereth Arryn was wed to Lysa Tully, the daughter of the greedy and ambitious Lord of Riverrun. Mace Tyrell spoke like a lickspittle in their meeting and was only too eager to serve the crown, though he did mention bringing his children to King's Landing, more specifically his daughter Margaery. He cannot be in the small council. I need wise and capable people, not ambitious people reaching for the stars. With that in mind, Lord Tyrell, surely it would be best to be a father to your children back home in Highgarden, asked Elia. My queen, asked the oaf of Highgarden, as his mother was fond to referring him as. I mean no offense, Lord Tyrell, but I need wise and learned men to fill the positions of the small council. Of course, since being named Lord of Highgarden, you are experienced in stewardship and in war, but now that my son's regency has just begun, I feel it necessary that experienced men at administration and stewardship with many years of experience behind them take up positions. You understand, don't you, my lord? I do, my queen. But there will be a chance of it in the future, he wondered. Of course, Lord Tyrell sweetly said Elia. And might I ask, my queen, about a potential betrothal to be made between our two houses, asked Mace Tyrell. As he asked this, he looked at her with pathetic eyes like a dog hungry for more food, when it had already been fed an entire bowl of food. My Lord Tyrell, I think it best that we leave this subject once our children are grown and it is clear if they are good and suitable matches, Elia replied diplomatically and with as kind a smile as she could. If you think I should reward your idleness in the rebellion with marrying your daughter to my son, you are far more stupid than your reputation says. At last, she met with Tywin Lannister. I must congratulate you, your grace, he said. What? Do you jest, Lord Lannister, she asked. Jest? No, I admire how you convinced Brandon Stark to side with you, and through him, the rest of the nobility. I attempted to do the same, but he showed no interest, he replied. You seem to be unsuccessful in all your recent attempts at certain endeavors, she said. Such as, he asked quizzically, with a glare. Elia picked up a report written up by the new City Watch commander Jeremy Buckwell and varies on what atrocities were committed by the Lannister forces. Such as the sacking of nearly a fifth of the city, the murders of 1,200 small folk, the raping of 500 women and children, some more than once, the looting and burning of 300 houses and 200 stores and establishments. And then there's also the final matter. She paused as she put the report back down on her desk. In which not one, but two of your bannermen cornered myself, my good mother, my handmaidens and our children in the Red Keep's gardens. I had no involvement in either of those, your grace. My intentions were to peacefully capture the city. I would never condone the deaths of innocent small folk or the murder of my future king. Truly, Lord Lannister. For I do not recall hearing the details of such chivalry in that famous song, The Rains of Castamere, replied Elia. He frowned before he looked up at Sir Barristan and then at Uncle Lewin, whom stood by Elia's side as she sat in the king's solar. Both kept their hands on their swords as they glared at the Lord of Casterly Rock. She didn't trust Arthur, Sir Oswell or Lord Commander Hightower after how they followed Rhaegar's orders. I'll deal with them later. What do you want of my house, your grace? He asked. House Lannister, under its own direction and for its own purposes, sacked a part of the city and raped, looted, murdered and attempted to murder 6 members of the royal family, all of whom were women and children. All whilst not taking part in the war until a victor was decided after the Battle of the Trident, Elia stated as she angrily faced the man whom gave the command. To his credit, he didn't shirk as she confronted him. For the king's peace, you will keep your head, and after the men captured by Lord Stark have done their due in repairing the damages they have done, they shall be sent to the wall. You however, Lord Tywine, will pay a compensation of 1 million gold dragons. You dare? I do not dare, Lord Tywine, she replied, emphasizing the Lord part. She rested her hands on the corners of the table and leant forwards, determined to show no fear to the man whom tried to have her and her children murdered. Do you truly think you can frighten me into giving you more than this? Even my mercy has limits. It is your choice, Lord Tywine. Do so without one more complaint, and I will release Sir Jaime from the King's Guard for not doing his duty in protecting the royal family, and he will return to Casterly Rock as your heir, and history will remember the events of the sack as not being under your command. But persist in your stubbornness for whatever reasons, and I will name Tyrion Lannister Lord of Casterly Rock and send you to the headsman's block and have the world know what it was you tried to do, she snapped. He paused and remained sat on his seat, whilst Sir Barristan and Uncle Lewin, whom had taken a few steps to silence him, halted. He glared at her before nodding just once. 1 million, he agreed. Fortunately for you, I am not as vengeful as Aes. If I was, I would drain the Westerlands of all gold and silver for all that you did to the people of King's Landing and tried to do me and to my family. But I could never do that, especially not to the good people of the Westerlands. A people cannot be judged for the actions of their ruler, if only that was a lesson you could abide by. After meeting with Hoster Tully and appointing him the Master of Coin, all positions of the small council were filled. Oberyn was Master of Laws, Lucerys Valerian was Master of Ships, Varys was Master of Whispers, Hoster Tully was Master of Coin, and Jon Arryn was Hand of the King. Pycelle was sent to the wall when Varys showed Elia and Rolla the correspondence between he and Tywine Lannister and the Lord of Casterly Rock, telling him to convince Aes to open the gates to him when the time came. Rolla had already sent a raven to the citadel of Old Town, asking for a replacement. Now, one last meeting with my former husband. After speaking with the High Septon, he had agreed to sign the documents of divorcing their marriage, requiring evidence of adultery from at least one of them. Ned and Ash both were all too eager to give evidence on that part. Elia was escorted to the black cells by Uncle Lewin before they came to the final cell, where he was kept. Open it, she ordered the gaoler. Queen, he replied before unlocking the door. Uncle Lewin placed a torch inside a sconce as Elia entered the cell. She looked to see Rhaegar curled in the corner of his cell. He looked distraught as he looked up to Elia. Without a word, he burst into tears before he buried his head in his hands. The clothes he had been wearing were tattered and ruined. His face and hands were covered in bruises and cuts. Elia. Elia. Forgive me. I'm so sorry, he tried to say, reaching out for her. Gods, what words did Roose Bolton say to crush him so? Elia simply avoided his touch. And then she slapped him hard across his face. The sound of which reverberated around the cell. That's the first time I have ever physically harmed anyone, she realized. Rhaegar was so weakened from his imprisonment that he fell back, bashing his head against the wall slightly. Even after everything, the first thing that came into Elia's mind was to apologize for doing that and to see if he was all right, but they both knew what he deserved. You deserve worse than that, Rhaegar. Do you know how close I came to being raped and murdered? To seeing our children be murdered before my own eyes? Do you? He flinched from her shouts. Never before had Elia had shouted at him. She had always been kind and gentle to Rhaegar, to Rolla and to all in the Red Keep. But now, she showed him her inner strength. Elia, I swear to you that I never wanted this, he pleaded cowardly whilst not facing her. His crumbling body barely could face her as she glared at him. Was any of this worth it, Roriger? Lyanna Stark. Your precious Visenya that she didn't give birth to. Instead, she gave birth to a stillborn son, at the cost of her own life. Well, was any of what you did worth the anguish and horror you inflicted on the realm and your own family? His only reply was the sobs he cried as he finally looked up at Elia. Your mother. Your brother. Your sister, Daenerys, only a few moons old now. Your wife. Your own children. They almost all were murdered. And all because of you. What will they think of you when they grow up? That you were a hero whom fought for House Targaryen and for their safety. He curled into a ball and sobbed even more, even punching the wall. Elia turned to the Gaular. Pick him up and chain him to the wall. He did as he was told and picked the sobbing wreck that was once the man she loved, and she thought that he felt the same way about her. But if one's deeds were anything to go by, he had never did feel the same about her. Even as he was stood against the wall and his hands and feet were manacled to the wall, he still pathetically sobbed and his head hung low. Gods curse the day I fell in love with you, Roriger. And that your precious prophecies were of more importance than I and your children, she said furiously as her face screwed into a face of bitter hatred. She calmed down before speaking again, waiting for him to finish his sobs. Elia waited, but he hadn't stopped, so she continued, speaking loudly to cut through his sobs, though Elia wasn't used to speaking loud with her gentle voice. Aegon is to be king, after much deliberation with the Lords Paramount alongside R'hllor. I rule a regency now with her and a new small council. You, my former husband, are to go to the Night's Watch. He looked up, bemused at her words. Oh, did I not mention it? We are no longer husband and wife, seeing as you never cared for the life we once shared and the joy I tried to bring to you in the forms of our children, she said as she crossed her arms. No. No, Elia, I loved you. I still love you. I will always love you, Elia, he pleaded through his tears. You have an interesting way of showing it, Roriger. But what you say doesn't change that you are going to Castle Black. But first, a concession. What? He asked. Very understandably, Brandon and Ned Stark want you to die. For what you did to their father and to their sister. Did you not think about that when you marched on them in the Riverlands? All because of a war you started in which had already claimed the lives of thousands of innocent small folk and boys and men dying on the battlefield. His face screwed into one of bitter hatred, at himself, as he thought about this. But you said I was to go to Castle Black, he said. I did, she said with a nod before the sound of an iron door opened. Ah, here they are, she said. And sure enough, Brandon and Ned entered the cell. 5 minutes, she said before she left the cell, followed by Uncle Luwin. As the door shut, she could hear Roriger's pleading voice. I never wanted her to die. I just. Do you really think that will convince them, Roriger? Gods, in spite of all the books you read, you really are a fucking idiot. His pleading was silenced by the sounds of punches and kicks from inside the cell. What you are enduring right now, Roriger, is nothing in comparison to what you put me through and what our family might have suffered had it not been for the 2 men whom beat you now. Ironically, the family whom have suffered the most in this war and have the most reason to hate us and wish us dead, are the ones whom protected House Targaryen in its hour of need. Something which mere gold and rewards cannot easily repay what House Targaryen owes to House Stark. My queen. Uncle Luwin's voice interrupted her thoughts as she turned to face him. I think that that's enough. It wouldn't do for him to die before he reaches Castle Black, said Uncle Luwin. Elia glanced through the door's window to see Roriger hanging from his manacles. The only reason he hadn't fallen to the floor was for the manacles which held him to the wall. And then she witnessed Ned kicking Roriger violently in the balls. Try and have your precious Visenya with bruised balls, you fucking coward. Brandon shouted before he punched his face repeatedly whilst holding a hard grip on his long hair. Elia nodded to Uncle Luwin. He loudly knocked on the door thrice. Her Grace says that that's enough. The 2 Stark brothers looked at the door and then at each other. Ned spat at Roriger's face. May you find redemption at the wall. They left the cell, satisfied as they began to wipe blood from their hands, in spite of how tired they both looked. Elia. Might I see Rhaenys and Aegon? And Daenerys? Just one last time before I go, he begged, through pained and labored breath. Elia turned around to Rhaegar chained to the wall, hanging from the manacles, with drool and blood pouring from his mouth. You don't even deserve to speak their names for all that you did. The Gauler closed the door and Elia turned to him. Send for a maester and have him cleaned up. Chapter 7, The First Step to Salvation. Chapter text. Catelyn I. At last, the war is finally over, Catelyn thought as she could see the army of Riverrun marching towards the castle, with father, Uncle Brynden, Bran, Eldbert and Eddard leading from the front. They are here, Catelyn said to Lysa excitedly. Both they and Edmure were glad that the war was over and that father and Uncle Brynden were safe. Especially now that Catelyn and Lysa both had recovered from giving birth to their children. Catelyn had given birth to Robb and Lysa had given birth to Harold. Catelyn stood with Lysa and Edmure in the courtyard of the Great Hall, where father climbed down from his horse and smiled as he looked at his children. He walked to Catelyn first. Cat. Gods, I am happy to see you, he said. And are you, father, said Catelyn as they hugged and father kissed her head. And how is your son? Little Robb, he asked as he broke from the hug. He is well, but resting currently, Catelyn replied. Father beamed at her before walking to Lysa and hugging her and asking after her and Harold. Uncle Brynden beamed at Catelyn before hugging her. And how's my little cat, he asked affectionately. Happy to see you all come home, Uncle, she replied. And we are happy to be back home, said Uncle Brynden before Bran climbed down from his horse, as dashing and handsome as Catelyn remembered from when they first met at the tourney at Harrenhal. Hello, Cat, said Bran with his charming and dazzling smile. Gods, that smile always makes me feel weak at my knees. Hello, Bran, she replied before Bran wrapped his arms around her waist and bent down to kiss her. How are you, he asked. I am well, my love, she replied with a beaming smile. And Robb? Is he well, he asked. He is. Come and meet him, she said. Bran beamed at the thought of meeting his son. He hastily ran after her as she excitedly led him inside the great hall and into the nursery, where Robb lay sleeping on his bed, with his father's dark hair, but possessed Catelyn's blue eyes. My boy. My handsome little boy, said Bran. He knelt beside the cradle and scooped Robb in his large and muscular arms. Bran beamed down at him as he held him. Catelyn worried when she saw Robb awaken and begin to coo and fuss. Robb, my love, she said. But Bran held on to Robb, shushing him gently. Hey. Hey, my little boy. It's okay. It's okay, he whispered. Robb fussed gently as he looked up at his father with curiosity. Hello. I'm your father. Your hairy and stupid father, said Bran with a grin before he pulled some silly faces and rocked him gently around in his arms. Robb soon began to stop fussing and Catelyn beamed at how Bran was making Robb relax so quickly. Bran. Bran and Catelyn turned around to see his younger brother, Eddard, called Ned by Bran and their friends. Is that my handsome little nephew? Asked Eddard. Aye. Robb, this is your Uncle Ned, said Bran before gently passing him to Eddard. Hello. Hello, little Robb. You already look like a little wolf, don't you? Asked Eddard with a rare smile on his normally grim face. It surprised Catelyn and Lysa that he was wed to a Sheridan, one of the most beautiful women in the world, whilst he was plain and not as handsome as his older brother. She had seen her numerous times at the tourney at Harrenhal and thought her beautiful enough to be a queen. But now she was wed to the younger brother of the Lord of Winterfell, plain-faced in comparison to Bran and normally looked so grim and unhappy, and the two were to rule Starfall together. Lady Catelyn, said Eddard with a nod to her. Lord Eddard, she replied. Eddard smiled before passing Robb to Catelyn. Catelyn beamed down at her son and kissed his forehead. So, Ned. When are you and Ashera moving to Starfall? Asked Bran. Tomorrow. I just wanted to come here to meet my nephew, Eddard replied. And I heard you have a son of your own. What's his name? Asked Bran. His name is Jon. Jon Dayne, Eddard replied proudly. Eddard, Caitlin and Bran left the nursery when Caitlin placed Robb back in his cradle and Lysa had brought Elbereth into the nursery to introduce him to their son Harold. Eddard had left them to ride a raven, whilst Caitlin and Bran sat together in the dining hall of the Great Hall. We heard so much of the Trident and then of King's Landing. What has happened in King's Landing now? Does Queen Elia rule as regent for her son? She asked. Aye, she rules on behalf of Aegon, alongside Queen Dowager R'hllor. They have a small council made up: Jon Arryn as the Hand of the King, Oberyn Martell as Master of Laws, Lucerys Velaryon as Master of Ships, and your father will soon be Master of Coin, said Bran. Father? On the small council. He has always been ambitious for House Tully to rise further, and to achieve what Kermit and Oscar Tully achieved during the Dance of the Dragons. If father is on the small council, why is he here? Asked Caitlin. Because he wanted to go over things with your uncle Brynden and make sure that he rules Riverrun in his stead and raises Edmure to one day be Lord of Riverrun, as well as meet his grandsons, said Bran. But, why are you not on the small council? Asked Caitlin. Caitlin soon realized that this was a very bad question to ask him. His face screwed in anger briefly before he calmed down. Cat, that accursed castle and that stinking city is where I was imprisoned. It was where I was forced to watch father burn to death. All whilst good courtiers, just and kind nobles and chivalrous and honourable knights all did nothing as father was murdered by order of a mad king, said Bran. Caitlin held both his hands as he finished. Bran, I am sorry. I didn't mean it like that, she said. I know. Forgive me. But I have no wish to be in that disgusting city any more than I need to. Not when I have spent more time as Lord of Winterfell in King's Landing than I have in Winterfell, he said. And what of Rhaegar? She asked. He is on a ship to the Night's Watch. Before he left, Queen Elia permitted Ned and I to beat him for all that he did to Lyanna and to father, he explained. Lyanna. Poor Lyanna. So many had to die, all because Rhaegar was so obsessed with prophecies and couldn't keep it tucked in his doublet. We go to Winterfell tomorrow, as soon as you are ready and as soon as Robb is ready to go, said Bran with a smile as he held her hands. He leant in and kissed Caitlin on the lips. She wrapped her hands around him as she pulled him in and held the kiss. Gods, I've missed you, Brandon Stark. Are you ready for this, Cat? To move to Winterfell and start a new life in the north? He asked. I am, yes, Bran, she replied fervently. Though the north still worships the old gods, I will adapt. And perhaps one day, one of our sons may be in the Kingsguard, and one of our daughters will be Aegon's queen. Interlude 4, 10 Things You Didn't Know About Chris Fulton, T. Vothermind. Young Roderick Harlaw, Chris Fulton. Roderick sat at the head of his table in the great hall of the Great Keep of Pike. Sat down on the sea-stone chair, Balon Greyjoy talked of the future of the Iron Islands. It's not even been half a year since Good Quayan was killed fighting the Reachmen at the mouth of the Mandaya. And now, Balon thinks to make himself king and restore the old way. Roderick looked at Balon, married to his sister Alanis, as she had her hands wrapped around her youngest children at the high table. Roderick and Marin are both like their father and uncles. Heads filled with dreams of glory, plunder and conquest. Quayan had the right of it. The Ironborn have to adapt with the rest of the new world, before we perish with the old. Roderick looked around at the many gathered in the great hall, come from all around the Iron Islands. Captains and lords alike. The land of 10,000 kings, indeed, Roderick thought as he saw the families gathered at each table. Blacktide, Botley, Cott, Drum, Goodbrother, Fairwind, Kenning, Mire, Awkward, Saltcliffe, Spa, Stonehouse, Stonetree, Sunderly, Tawny, Vomark and Wynch. And Roderick's House of Harlaw and the many branches of House Harlaw, spread around the island of Harlaw. I should speak with Balon before he speaks to the entire Great Hall. I know that I will not succeed, but I owe it to my sister and her children with this ignorant fool. I must, if there is a chance to save the Iron Islands and its people from a war that we cannot win with the mainlanders from Winterfell to Sunspear. In his time serving under Quayan, Roderick was proud to serve under him. To Quayan, he was both his friend and closest bannerman. From all the recorded history that he had read, Roderick thought that he was perhaps the wisest Greyjoy of them all. He certainly proved that when he sought to end all plundering and reaving and dreams of restoring the Ironborn old way as well as maintaining closer ties with the mainland. Roderick had first served under him when he sailed his ship in the Iron Fleet in the War of the Nine Penny Kings at the age of 4 and 10. Bolon, said Roderick, standing up and raising his cup to him. Roderick. Brother. I'm glad to see you here. Away from your books and amongst your people, replied Bolon in high spirits. Roderick was known as the reader, favoring books as opposed to sailing across the 14 seas in search of plunder, glory and to please the drowned god. In his early days as a reaver, Roderick's favored spoils from raids were books, whether from the mainland or from Essos. And in my time of reading, I know what it is you intend and I know that you will fail and bring ruin to us all. Gods, sister, why did you have to marry such a damned fool? Roderick leant down, that only the Lord Paramount of the Iron Islands and Lord Reaper of Pike would hear him speak. Bolon, don't do this. War with the mainlanders is not a war we can win. They may be divided now, true, but by the time an Iron Fleet is ready to make war on them, they will be united and ready to face off against any fleet of the Iron Islands, he said. You would have us deny our heritage. Deny the drowned god his will for the Iron Islands to be free as were always meant to be. Sit back down, reader. Now he snapped, his smile replaced by a menacing and mocking frown. Stupid fools. I'm surrounded by ignorant fools who live in the past. Roderick looked to his sister, whom whispered to her two youngest. Asher and Theon. My namesake and Marin are too corrupted by their father and Greyjoy uncles. It may be that I will need to raise either of them. Theon perhaps. If I raise him well, as his grandfather would have wanted, then there may be some hope for House Greyjoy and for the Iron Islands. I owe it to Quayan's memory, and to Alanis. Comrades. Captains. My lords of the Iron Islands. Bolon boomed at the top of his voice. All but Roderick toasted their cups to Bolon and began to quieten down. My brothers of iron, salt and sea, my father now feasts in the halls of the drowned god. He died a true Ironborn, with a sword in his hand and his feet on his ship. But in spite of how he died, all that he did brought nothing but ruin to the Iron Islands. What of the ruin you will bring on us if you make war with the mainlanders? Quayan sought only to save us from the likes of you and your dreams of the glorious days of the past. They are just that, dreams. If you cannot wake up from your dreams, Bolon, they shall soon turn into night terrors, ones which all Iron Islanders will not wake up from. My father sought to make us like the mainlanders. But we are not mainlanders. We are of the Iron Islands and we do not pay the gold price. We are Ironborn and we pay the iron price. Bolon bellowed. His speech was, sadly, well received by all in the great hall, from his eldest sons, to his brothers and all lowborn and highborn captains and lords of the Iron Islands. The Targaryens forced us to bow to them nearly 300 years ago. But where are their dragons? Where are the winged beasts that they rode to war? Dead. All dead. Just like they are to us. Again they cheered at Bolon's speech. You will kill us all, Bolon, you vicious idiot. The mainlanders are all weak. They are divided. Thousands of their best men have died in their stupid war. And their king is but a babe at his mother's breast. A whelp of a Dornish whore and an inbred Targaryen, whom now goes to the Night's Watch in shame. My brethren, the time is now. The time has come for the Ironborn to at last be free. To be strong. As the drowned god wills of us all. He makes good speeches, true. By it's one thing to make promises for a glorious war. But in the end, all guarantees you are giving us, Bolon, is a glorious death. That is not the legacy I want to leave to my sons or their own children. Ours is the old way. For what is dead may never die, but rises again. Harder and stronger. Bolon roared proudly. They cheered, stupidly, drunk on wine, mead and the promise of gold, glory and conquest. 5 years from now, my brothers, once the Iron Fleet is built anew, we shall make war with the mainlander lickspittles of the inbred boy. The drowned god will look on us with pride as we raid, plunder and take thralls and salt wives. For the true Ironborn that we are, we pay the iron price for what we want. And soon, we shall pay the iron price for a new kingdom. One to rival all that the whores had conquered and built. Bolon's speech came to an end when he bid all feast and drink. Whilst Bolon watched with pride as Victorian and Aeron encouraged Roderick and Marin to drink in contest, for it would be Marin's first time drinking, Roderick walked towards his sister, whom had already sent Asher to her chambers. "Sister," said Roderick with a nod. "Brother. What a time to be Ironborn," she commented. "On that we can agree. What a time to be here on the Iron Islands. But why must I be the only one with any sense and realism?" "I fear your husband may be biting off more than he can chew," said Roderick. "We are of the Iron Islands. It has always been our destiny to raid, conquer and crush the mainlanders," Roderick said. "Alanis, you've been spending too much time listening to Balon and his rants of the old way. Things are different now than they were before the Targaryens came. The Ironborn will be facing armies and fleets from Winterfell to Sunspear. All of them will be hardened from fighting in this rebellion they've just fought. You may think them weak because they are not Ironborn, but with or without dragons, united under a king's leadership, they will crush any opposition to them," said Roderick. "Brother, opposition? What stupid fancy words you are speaking. Did you learn those from your books or from the mainlanders you befriended with Quayen?" Alanis said mockingly. "Sister, I am doing this for you and for your children. Because when war does come, I may be one of the few that can actually save them." "Will you let me take on a ward?" asked Roderick. "What?" she asked, confused at the change in the conversation. "Let me take on Theon as a ward. That I may teach him how to sail and how to lead," said Roderick. "And hopefully, teach him wisdom, realism and have a sense of thinking for his people. I will not let all that Quayen had done for us to die with him whilst he drinks and feasts with the drowned god." "What's this?" asked Balon. Roderick and Alanis turned to Balon, joining them. "I was offering to take your son on as a ward," Balon Roderick replied, gesturing to Theon. "Theon? The lad is as dull as a practice sword and can't tell the difference between a finger dance and a feasting dance," said Balon. "He is your son, and he is 5 feet from where you stand and drink like the glory-drunk moron that you are. Well then, let me take him on. Under my roof at 10 Towers, he can grow a brain, muscle and become a captain you can be proud to call your son. A good thing I asked for Theon. Had I asked for Roderick or Maren, he would have thought I intended to teach them to share my beliefs in the old way. Fine, take Theon. Maybe he can learn something from your books," Reader said Balon. Alanis turned to her youngest son and gently whispered to the boy, only 6 years old. "This is your uncle Roderick, Theon. You are going to be staying with him and learning to be a captain," she said with an affectionate smile she reserved only for her children. "Yes, mother," he said as he looked up at Roderick, whom smiled at his youngest nephew. "Now, go and speak with him. Tell him of your first lessons from Dagmar," she said with her loving smile. Theon stepped down from his seat at the high table and walked around it to join Roderick. Roderick smiled gently at him as he walked around the table. But as he did so, a piece of meat was flung at him. As Theon wiped meat from his humiliated and saddened face, Roderick looked angrily at Maren, whom was laughing sneeringly as he was about to fling another piece of meat at his younger brother. Roderick snapped as he turned to his offending nephew. He stormed towards him and slapped him around the head as he was about to drink from his tankard. Maren was so surprised by Roderick's slap that he spilled his own mead over his lap and the meat he was to fling at Theon had fallen on the ground. "What the fuck?" he asked stupidly. "You'll never be a captain worthy of his own ship in the Iron Fleet if spill your own mead over yourself, stupid boy," Roderick retorted. "I am Ironborn. I will be the greatest captain of the Iron Islands one day," Maren pathetically boasted. "How is it that Alanis gave birth to this stupid boy? Sit down and have another drink, lad. You heard your uncle. When the reader gives his wisdom, you best be listening," boomed Victorian, grinning broadly as he placed a filled tankard in front of Maren's seat. Maren was distracted from Theon and from Roderick and began to drink from the tankard provided by Victorian, Lord Captain of the Iron Fleet, and perhaps the stupidest of the Greyjoys, if not the strongest and best fighter. Roderick couldn't help but glance at Euron, whom was eyeing Roderick with his malicious black eye, having placed his eye patch over his charming blue eye. Roderick glared at the crow's eye, whom merely smirked evilly at him before placing his eye patch back over his black eye before speaking with Balon. "Come, Theon," said Roderick, putting his hand on his shoulder and leading him to a seat next to his own at the Harlaw table, near to Roderick's own sons, Henk and Harwin. Roderick hoped that they could befriend their young cousin, in spite of Henk being 4 years older and Harwin being 2 years older. "Thank you, uncle," he said shyly. "Does he do that a lot?" asked Roderick, leaning in so that none around them would overhear. Not that they would, he thought, because of all the commotion around them. Theon looked at him nervously. I am not trying to hurt you or trick you, Roderick said gently to reassure him. He and Roderick both, he replied sullenly. You're supposed to be brothers, not enemies. There's no highborn or lowborn aboard a longship. There is only your shipmates whom you row with. Whom you endure the thundering wrath of the storm god with. Whom you welcome the waves of the drowned god alongside. If you cannot learn to fight alongside your brothers and your own kin, how can you fight alongside your own crew and lead them on voyages? Why do they do that, do you think? Asked Roderick. I'm stupid and weak and that I don't deserve to be a Greyjoy or a captain one day, he replied sadly. No. You are not stupid, nor are you weak nor craven, Roderick said with a serious stare at his nephew. But how can I prove to them? To father and mother? To my sister, brothers and uncles, he asked. I will show you. I will teach you how to fight, how to lead, how to be a sailor and to be wise, replied Roderick as he clasped his hand on Theon's shoulder before pushing his plate toward Theon and letting him eat. I will protect you and care for you, Theon. I promise. Chapter 8, A Bitter Confrontation. Chapter text. Elia 4. Do not think of this a punishment, Sir Jaime. Think of it as a reward for informing us of what Aerys intended, but more importantly as returning to where you belong, said Elia. By all rights, your grace, I should remain in the Kingsguard and my father should be sentenced to either the wall or to death, said Jaime. Yes, but whilst I want justice for what almost became of me, I want there to be peace in my son's great kingdom, Elia replied. And justice and revenge are far more easily obtained in times of peace than war. Furthermore, there is less chance of innocent small folk being caught in the middle of it. In spite of almost what became of herself and her family, Elia would not want to put House Lannister through what Tywin Lannister had inflicted on its own rebellious bannermen, Houses Reyne and Tarbeck. And Elia especially hated it when innocent small folk were made to suffer for the higher ambitions of the players of the Game of Thrones. Which was why she was especially keen for the small folk of King's Landing to be well provided for now that she was Queen Regent and whilst Aegon was growing up. Ventures which both she and Rollo were sponsoring. After the captured Westerland soldiers had finished their labors around King's Landing, they had been sent by ship to the Wall. It annoyed Elia that Tywin Lannister escaped justice and she was giving him what he always wanted, his heir back. But it gained peace and stability. And now, with Jaime no longer in the Kingsguard, there were two other positions to fill, to replace Jaime and the fallen Sir Jonnet Hordeary. Speaking with Rollo, they had agreed on Sir Alisa Thorne and Sir Lyle Crickehall, a Westerlands knight whom had been part of a group of knights selected to capture and kill all of various alchemists whom knew where the wildfire stored around the city was kept. Sir Lyle, Elia liked, for in spite of his cheerful and brutish appearance, he was eager to serve and to earn a reputation as a legendary knight of the Kingsguard. And Elia had appointed Sir Jaime Buckwell as commander of the City Watch. But as Elia was meeting with Sir Alisa and Sir Lyle personally in the King's Solar, where they eagerly and unhesitatingly accepted her decision to be placed into the Kingsguard, there was a knock on the door. Yes, asked Elia. My queen, Lord Commander Hightower, Sir Arthur and Sir Oswell are here at your command, said Uncle Luwin. Bid them in, Sir Luwin, she replied as she finished writing the orders. Elia briefly glared at the three as they entered, including Arthur. There was a time when I trusted you, Arthur. When I thought that I loved you. Elia looked up at the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. His face was bruised and battered after Brandon Stark had punched him for letting Aerys burn his father. He at the very least had the decency to admit that he deserved that. Lord Commander, Sir Alisa Thorne and Sir Lyle Crickehall are to be sworn into the Kingsguard tonight and join your brotherhood, said Elia. Yes, my queen, he replied before looking at the new appointees. I look forward to seeing you both join the storied ranks of the Kingsguard tonight, said Elia with a smile. My queen, they replied before taking their leave. Sir Arthur, Sir Oswell, Lord Commander. Stay. The two new knights had left, leaving Elia alone to confront them. Perhaps it would be best to be like the Northerners and get to the point. I would like you three to give me one damn good reason as to why I should not exile you to the wall with Rhaegar and exchange your disgraced white cloaks for black ones, she said angrily, but calmly. None of them were expecting this statement. My queen. How proud of yourselves do you feel? knowing that you prevented a girl of 5 and 10 from getting to safety. Not providing her a maester. Nor even a wet nurse. Have you even been able to sleep at night knowing that neither she nor her child survived what your precious prince, my former husband, put her through? Well. From those questions, both Sir Oswell and Arthur angrily looked at the floor in self-disgust and shame. Whereas Sir Gerald held his ground and faced her. Admirable, but he must be used to it from being forced to endure listening to Aes rape Roller and witness him order the burnings of people with wildfire from small folk to Rickard Stark. We but did our sworn duty, my queen, said Sir Gerald. Remind me, Sir Gerald, what is the wording of a knighthood? In the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the young and innocent. In the name of the maid, I charge you to protect all women. Is that wrong? Is it? He frowned before he nodded. It is not, your grace, he replied. So what did you do for Lyanna Stark? What did you do for her whilst she endured her imprisonment in Dorne, my homeland, yet another insult from Rhaegar to me? And where were you when the Red Keep was under attack and what remained of the royal family were almost raped and butchered by the thugs of Tywin Lannister? How is it that a small group of northerners, including the second son of Rickard Stark, outshone the brave and honourable true knights of the Kingsguard? Rhaegar ordered us, my queen, pathetically said Sir Oswell. Yes, but you didn't try to advise him that this was wrong. All of this. That far from being a heroic and romantic prince, he was using her as a broodmare for his precious prophecies. The realm think you three as true knights, but I don't see true knights before me. I see 3 fucking disgraces. You, each of you, are insults to your noble houses, to your families, to the Kingsguard and to your sworn brotherhood. And I don't know if I or my children or any of House Targaryen will ever be safe when you 3 are around. Elia saw tears forming in Arthur's eyes. She rolled her eyes before he spoke. Your Grace, I swear that we, each of us, shall endeavour to reprove our devotion to our oaths as knights and as Kingsguard. How? She demanded with a raised brow. Before either he or the other 2 could reply, she spoke again. I'm still to be convinced to refrain from signing the paperwork and sending you join Rhaegar at the wall, she reminded them. Your Grace, I know that you feel we did wrong in what we were ordered to do by Rhaegar Targaryen. I cannot speak in defense for what he ordered us to do or his reasoning behind it. But there's not been a day since Eddard Stark had told us all of what almost became of the royal family that I haven't hated myself for what could have happened and that we were not there to protect you or the royal family. That is something I will always live with, and for what it's worth, there are simply no words to say just how truly sorry I am, said Sir Gerald. He has a point, Elia conceded. The 3 must be burdened with guilt and self-hatred. Just as Rhaegar is. Which I think is a worthy punishment, though not as grueling as Oberyn's poisons or Roose Bolton's tortures. Tell me what each of you think of him. Of Rhaegar. Not what you thought of him before the rebellion. Now this very minute, what do you think of him? She faced Sir Gerald first. I am disappointed in him, my queen. I had hoped that he would be honourable and take his duties as crown prince pensively as he was expected to from his adolescence to his adulthood. I never would have encouraged him to do what he had done, he said. Elia raised a brow before turning to Oswell. What say you, Sir Oswell? Your Grace, for many years, I considered him to be a good man whom could one day be a great king. I didn't want to believe in the prophecies that he believed in, but I knew it was all important to him, and so I willingly followed him and went with him and Sir Arthur and took Lyanna Stark to Dorne. We had suggested to Rhaegar that he allow her to end the war by writing to her brothers that she was well. But he was more focused on his prophecy and no attention coming to the tower. She turned to Arthur, last of all. It hurts to just look at you, a man I once considered a friend and one I once felt for when we were children. Do you know it feels to see you like this, Arthur? Doubting your loyalty to the royal family because of your own personal loyalty to him. And I once considered you a childhood friend, she said. Her saying those words to him hurt him more than any other word could, she noticed. Your Grace, there's no way in which I cannot express how sorry I am for all that happened and all that I didn't do. I am aware that you don't believe my word when I say that I would do anything to reprove my loyalty to the Iron Throne, but I swear there will not be day in which I will not try to, he said. Any moment, he'll fall to his knees and begin to weep, she thought. It's ironic, isn't it? that the only ones whom are deserving of a knighthood and could be considered the best choices of a true knight in the Kingsguard, aren't even knights at all. Eddard Stark is one of the most honorable men I've ever met, and that hasn't changed from just looking at you three. If he wasn't married to your sister, Sir Arthur, I would have wanted him to be in the Kingsguard. Around him, I could feel safe, as would all of House Targaryen. And yet, I just don't feel safe around you. Not at all. She could see the bitter feelings of self-hate, anger and distress on the faces of all three as they contemplated going to the war. But, whilst I have given Tywin Lannister and Mace Tyrell a second chance, it would be hypocritical if I didn't do the same for you. Be glad that you have a second chance and that you may still wear your white cloaks. Their faces couldn't have changed from despair to relief any faster. Your Grace, thank you, for giving us this chance, said Sir Gerald. May your loyalty to House Targaryen never ever waver again, she said. Never again, Your Grace, said Sir Oswell. You may leave, said Elia. They left. I never would have truly exiled them to the war. I just want them to know how much I distrust them and what I think of their defense of Rhaegar and how they could have prevented the war from happening by simply convincing him or even knocking him out and beating some sense into him. Chapter 9, History I. Chapter Text. History I. An excerpt from The Regency of King Aegon VI by Grand Maester Leo Tyrell. The regency of King Aegon VI began in the immediate aftermath of what is known as Robert's Rebellion. Robert's Rebellion began with the disappearance of Lady Lyanna Stark, whom was alleged to have been kidnapped by Crown Prince Rhaegar, whom was already wed to Princess Elia Martell and with whom they had two children, Princess Rhaenys and Prince Aegon. Her eldest brother, Brandon Stark, heir to Winterfell, had rode to King's Landing, demanding the Crown Prince to answer for the alleged kidnapping of his sister. But the Crown Prince was not in the city and the heir to Winterfell was captured and imprisoned by order of King Aerys II. King Aerys, known as Aerys the Mad, had demanded that Rickard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, come to King's Landing and answer for the treasons committed by his son and his companions, Elbereth Arryn, Joffrey Mallister, Kyle Royce and Ethan Glover. Upon arrival in King's Landing, Rickard Stark volunteered to fight for his son's innocence in a trial by combat. But King Aerys instead had him burnt in the so-called trial by combat, naming fire as his champion. He had Brandon Stark tied up during the trial, with a Myrish strangulation device tied around his neck and a sword a few feet away. The Mad King had shouted at him to save his father with this sword, but knowing that he would die if he tried to, he furiously stayed his hand. Mad King Aerys decreed for Jon Arryn to surrender both his wards to him to be executed, those wards being Rickard Stark's second son Eddard and the young Lord of Storm's End, Robert Baratheon, betrothed to Lyanna Stark, before dispatching Lord Commander Gerald Hightower to find Crown Prince Rhaegar and return to King's Landing with him. However, Brandon Stark and his companions had cunningly managed to escape their imprisonment in the dreaded black cells of the Red Keep. They had escaped when young Ethan Glover managed to hide a rusted iron door's hinge in his clothes before giving it to Brandon Stark. When Brandon Stark was manacled to the walls of his cell, he had already concealed the hinge underneath his wrist, before pulling it out when he was alone. Now left with wiggle room for his hand, he freed it before a guard came to release him to bring to the Mad King. Brandon Stark bashed his head against the cell's door and took his keys and freed himself and his companions. Taking the clothes off from Gold Cloaks, they escaped the Red Keep before taking horses and riding for the Riverlands and then for the north. Infuriated by the news of their escapes, Aerys the Mad ordered for all of the prison guards on duty that night to be burnt alive. Returning to Winterfell, Brandon Stark led the armies of the north alongside his brother Eddard and marched south for the Riverlands. Upon their arrival in Riverrun, Brandon Stark and Elbereth Arryn, already betrothed to Catelyn and Lysa Tully, married their brides, and the armies of the north and the Vale were joined by a majority of the Riverlands army. In the Reach, having defeated loyalists to the Iron Throne amongst the Stormlands, Robert Baratheon marched to the Riverlands with the remnants of his army after his defeat at the Battle of Ashford by Randyll Tarly and Mace Tyrell. At the Battle of Stony September, the two rebel armies joined to defeat a loyalist army led by Jon Connington, whom was defeated personally by Elbereth Arryn and taken prisoner. At last, Crown Prince Rhaegar had returned to the capital, but without the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Sir Arthur Dayne or Sir Oswell went at his side. The Crown Prince led the Loyalist army of the Crownlands and Dorne as well as remnants of the Loyalists of the Riverlands, Stormlands and the Vale. At the Battle of the Trident, Crown Prince Rhaegar duelled with Robert Baratheon, whom almost killed him before his life was saved by Sir Jonat Hor Deari. Deari duelled with Robert Baratheon before the mighty Stormlord was backstabbed by Crown Prince Rhaegar. But before he could relish in this victory, Crown Prince Rhaegar was challenged by Brandon and Eddard Stark. Whilst Eddard Stark slew Sir Jonat Hor Deari, the Crown Prince was not only defeated by Brandon Stark, but beaten by the young Lord of Winterfell as he struck him with his helm thrice. With the Battle of the Trident won, rather than waste time by regrouping and preparing their forces for the march on King's Landing, Brandon and Eddard Stark led the Northern Army to the capital whilst their allies dealt with the aftermath of their victory. But what they hadn't counted on was the Westerland's army of 20,000 men, led by Tywin Lannister, whom had now marched towards the capital. Professing his loyalty to the Iron Throne, the Lord of Casterly Rock asked to be allowed inside and was granted this request by the Mad King. But the moment that the gates were opened, thousands of Lannister soldiers began to sack the city. Amidst the confusion, two of Tywin Lannister's bannermen, Sir Amory Lorch and Sir Gregor Clegane, rode to the Red Keep to murder the royal family. What neither the Lannisters nor the capital's garrison knew was that the Northern Army had also arrived and had snuck inside through the Iron Gate. Brandon Stark sent Eddard to the Red Keep to capture the Mad King and guard the royal family of Queen Rhaella, Prince Viserys, Princess Daenerys, Princess Elia, Princess Rhaenys and Prince Aegon. Whilst he led the Northern Army to take control of the city and kill the rampaging Lannister forces, working with the City Watch do so. Arriving at the Red Keep, Eddard Stark and his men got there just in time, to rescue the royal family from the rogue bannermen of Tywin Lannister. Gregor Clegane was slain by brave Lord Rickard Karstark whilst Eddard Stark beheaded Amory Lorch. Whilst protecting the royal family, Eddard Stark took the Mad King prisoner, alongside his last remaining Kingsguard, Sir Jaime Lannister. They arrived at the Lion's Gate, where Brandon Stark told Eddard to go to Dorne, where they had found out their sister was imprisoned by Rhaegar at a place called the Tower of Joy. Whilst his brother and 10 men left the city by fishing boat, Brandon Stark beheaded the man whom ordered for his father to die. He sent Jaime Lannister to bring the severed heads of the Mad King and the disgraced knights Clegane and Lorch to his father, whilst the corpses of his men were thrown from the walls. Brandon Stark proceeded to taunt the former Crown Prince that his brother was on his way to the Tower of Joy. The Crown Prince, long believing in the prophecy of the prince that was promised, thought that Lady Lyanna would give him a third child for the prophecy as opposed to his barren wife Elia Martell. He had madly tried to escape at the news before Brandon Stark silenced him with a hard punch to the face. Whilst Brandon Stark rode to the Red Keep to meet with Princess Elia and Queen Rhaella, his bannerman, Lord Roose Bolton, informed Rhaegar of what almost became of his family. He had fallen to his knees in tears and madly tried to escape to the Lannister encampment and kill the Lord of Casterly Rock, believing him to be behind the attempted murders of his family. In the Red Keep, Brandon Stark agreed to maintain order in the capital and hear out Princess Elia's claim for Crown Prince Aegon. In Dorne, Eddard Stark showed a letter written by Princess Elia's hand, ordering the Kingsguard captors to return to the capital. Eddard Stark found his sister, whom it had turned out, had been tricked by Rhaegar into believing he loved her, when he truly didn't and cared only for fulfilling the prophecy. But the Lady Lyanna had died giving birth to a stillborn son. After a brief reunion with his wife, Lady Ashera Dayne, in Starfall, they returned to the capital, where the Lords Paramount, barring Balon Greyjoy, were met by Princess Elia, whom spoke on behalf of her son's claim to the Iron Throne and the implanting of a regency until he was of age. Brandon Stark was the first to agree to the regency after Princess Elia had agreed that the Iron Throne would give concessions to all houses which had suffered the most, including House Baratheon, for losing its lord and Storm's End being starved an entire year by the army of Mace Tyrell. And House Stark, for losing its lord and Lady Lyanna, was awarded 500,000 gold dragons and the return of the unlawfully annexed lands of the new gift. In the years that followed, tragedy struck in the Iron Islands when Balon Greyjoy was murdered by his brother, Euron. During the civil war, called the Clash of the Crickens, that erupted shortly afterwards, his other brothers Victorian and Aeron were also killed by him, as well as Balon's sons Roderick and Maron. Balon's lady wife, Alanis Harlaw, and her daughter, Asha, had fled to Harlaw, the home of her brother and where her youngest son Theon was being warded. Euron Greyjoy was eventually defeated and had fled into exile after the Battle of Pike, where the armies sworn to fight for Theon Greyjoy's claim, led by his uncle Roderick Harlaw, had defeated Euron Greyjoy. Also fighting alongside Roderick Harlaw was an army sent by Queen Regent Elia Martell, led by Lord Commander Gerald Hightower. Euron Greyjoy had fled into exile into Essos, where it is said that he has raped, pillaged and looted across Essos, from Iben to Slavers Bay. Theon Greyjoy, now matured from his warding with his uncle and the terrible murders of most of his family, now prepares for the day when he will rule the Iron Islands. Chapter 10, The Dark Dragon. Chapter text. Trys. Well, we have the contract, said Captain Strickland. Thank the gods. I thought that we might never get the contract, thought Trys as he sat on his chair in Harry Strickland's tent. Did the First Magister and the Gonfalonier say when we would go to war, asked Trys. The Gonfalonier did. 2 moons from now, we fight the Tiroshi army in the disputed lands. Mayhap, we'll find the Mirish army there also, said Harry. And if we do, asked Brendel Byrne. Then we fight them too. The First Magister wants to look good for the Milords of Lies, especially when there is an election coming soon and he wants to be re-elected. So, you would have us risk the lives of all good men of the company, and for what? So that some silver-haired fuck can be re-elected as First Magister, asked Dick Cole. Or all our lives, asked Will Cole, his twin brother. That doesn't matter now. What matters is the contract and that we fulfill it, Harry snapped. Our word is as good as gold, thought Trys as he remembered the motto of the Golden Company. Having ended the meeting, Trys left the tent and walked to his part of the camp, where he commanded all the cavalry. After Robert's rebellion, hundreds of cavalry and knights whom had either fought for the rebels or the loyalists had put aside their differences when they came to Essos and joined the Golden Company. Trys was not one of them. Trys was the grandson of Demon Blackfyr, whom had been captain of the Golden Company at the age of 30. Until his murder at the hands of his cousin, Maelys, known as Maelys the Monstrous for his great height of at least 8 feet tall and his inhuman strength to the extent that he had killed a horse with a single punch and personally ripped off Demon's head just by twisting it. Maelys had led the Golden Company in the War of the Nine Penny Kings against King Jaehaerys II until his killing at the hands of Sir Barristan Selmy at the Stepstones. Trys grew up with his father, Daeron Blackfyr, and his Lysen mother, Myrmidora Heen, in a manse in Lies in relative comfort. Neither father nor mother wanted Trys to pursue his ambitions to do what no other Blackfyr had done, in usurping the Iron Throne from the Targaryens. Trys was especially eager now, with the news from Westeros that Aegon Targaryen was soon to be crowned King Aegon VI. It should be me being crowned king, and not that Targaryen inbred whelp. A time will come when I take the Iron Throne from the weak Targaryens and show the world, that the Blackfyres are not finished, nor will they ever. Trys entered his own tent and found his great sword, taken from the battlefield of the Stepstones, when Maelys' squire, Dagon Greyron, rescued the sword and returned with it to Lies, giving it to father, in the hopes that he would one day lead the company to take the Iron Throne from the weak Targaryens. Trys whirled and wielded Blackfyr around a few times. If father had stayed in the company, he could have eventually become its captain and he could have led the company across the Narrow Sea in the aftermath of Robert's rebellion and slaughter all Targaryens in the Red Keep. But no, he believes in staying at home and being a family man. I'll be a family man, when I am captain of the Golden Company, I have a great army of Essos and take the Iron Throne. Trys had joined the Golden Company at first as a squire at 11 for the then captain, Miles Tywin. And for 12 years, he had gained a reputation for fighting, first amongst other squires, then in battle against the Dothraki, pirates of the Stepstones, Tiroshi slaving bands and other sellsword companies. And for 3 years, he fought in the fighting pits of Slavers Bay, killing over 50 opponents with Blackfyr, and accumulating a collection of over a dozen swords and arcs of Valyrian steel. He was planning on gifting them to the other sergeants and knights of the company when Harry Strickland was killed and he would have the chance to lead the company. It's always been my destiny to lead the company and to lead them to Westeros and take what is owed to House Blackfyr. The Targaryens have shown that they're all mad cunts. It is the end of their time, and the beginning of the Blackfyres. Catelyn too. Of all the places of the north that Catelyn had travelled to in her 6 and 10 years of marriage to Bran, White Harbor was her favourite. Not simply because they were the foremost house of the north which held to the faith of the Seven in spite of House Marndale living in the north for centuries before Aegon the Conqueror began his conquest of the Seven Kingdoms. On this occasion, she and Bran were visiting White Harbor to meet with Lord Wyman to discuss the trading connections House Marndale had made and the merchant fleets they had built. Jory rode alongside them at the head of the Stark household guards that accompanied Bran and Catelyn on the journey to White Harbor. But now that Robb was of age and was close to completing his time as a ward with the Karstarks, Bran thought that Robb should wed into a northern family. Though Catelyn was glad that they were now seeking out a good marriage for Robb, a noble house of the north was not what she would have considered for a bride for the heir to Winterfell. "Bran, I still think that we can find a bride more suited for Robb," said Catelyn. Bran frowned at the words. "What are your thoughts, Cat? A daughter or niece of a Lord Paramount?" he asked. "Yes. His bride should be of a noble family equal to his own," she replied. "There are few families, if any at all, that are equal to House Stark, which once reigned as kings of the North for thousands of years," he replied proudly. "You know what I mean, Bran," she said. I do, Cat. And I see what you are thinking. But we cannot merely look for a bride from a southern family for Robb. If we do, he would be the second Lord of Winterfell in a row to marry a bride not of the North. The bannermen of the North have always been loyal to House Stark because House Stark has always rewarded their loyalty," said Bran. "No, I see that. But we are doing that, are we not? By restoring Moat Cailin and Wolf's Den, building Snowhelm and also the Cailin Canal," said Catelyn. "That's not enough. That would just be us awarding them to Alaric, Byrne and Rickard. We have to assure the bannermen that we have not forgotten them in our attempts to continue what father started. We have done plenty of that already. The Cailin Canal is built and all the kingdoms are trying to press a deal with us to give them a discount. The Lannisters, Baratheons and the Tyrells want to try and make a deal with House Stark for a cheaper use of the Cailin Canal," said Catelyn. "If we did that, every house of the south would want to make a marriage with House Stark. We cannot offer them discounts just because of marriages. It is what provides coin, and therefore food and supplies for the northern peoples, especially when, as always, winter is coming." "Besides, what marriages could they offer us?" asked Bran. "Tywin Lannister would offer Sansa to wed his grandson and second in line to Casterly Rock, Joffrey Lannister, or for his eldest granddaughter, Myrcella, to wed Robb. Mace Tyrell would offer Sansa to wed his eldest son and heir, Willers. Or for his daughter, Margaery, to wed Robb. And as for the Baratheons, Stannis would offer Sansa to wed his son and heir, Fortis, or for Robb to wed his daughter, Shireen." Bran smirked as she said the three families. "Myrcella Lannister and Margaery Tyrell, I doubt. Tywin Lannister and Mace Tyrell desperately want their blood on the Iron Throne," he said. "And you don't?" asked Catelyn. "I want our children to be happy when they are wed, Cat. Just as we are. There was many a time in which I was afraid of marrying you, because I didn't know what to expect from a southern woman. Though you proved me a fool, I was afraid, all the same," he explained. Catelyn decided to cease the matter there as they continued their ride to White Harbor and to the Merman's Court. Riding through the city was pleasant, Catelyn found, for though the city smelled of fish and salt, the small folk were content and there was peace and order. More so than what she had heard of King's Landing from hearing the stories from Bran, Lysa and from father. And at the Merman's Court, they were greeted by House Marndale, where the opulent and large Lord of White Harbor was the first to bow his head to their arrival. He was followed by his sons, Sir Willis and Sir Wendell, whom Catelyn recognized from their journeys to White Harbor when the Cailin Canal was being built. And next to Sir Willis, were his lady wife, Leona Woolfield, and their daughters, Winifred and Wyler. Winifred, the future lady of White Harbor, was already matrilineally betrothed to Eddard Karstark. And then there was Wyler, whom was rumored to be betrothed soon now that she was of age. Bran may consider Wyler to wed Robb. Doubtless, the Marndales would be overexcited at the thought of Wyler being Lady of Winterfell. She had long and braided hair. Her hair was blonde like the Arryns, inherited from her mother, whilst her sister was brown like her father, uncle and grandfather. But Catelyn noticed there was some green coloring in her blonde hair, as though she had dyed it green recently. Looking at the two sisters, Catelyn couldn't help but think how similar they both were to her Sansa and Arya. Bran and Catelyn climbed down from their horses and the Lord of White Harbor stepped forward with a beaming smile to greet them. "My lord, my lady, I and my house are very proud and honored to welcome you to my home," he said. "The honor is ours, Lord Marndale," said Bran with his dashing smile before he shook his hand. "And might I introduce you to my granddaughters, Winifred and Wyler?" he asked. Both walked to their grandfather's side, and curtsied to Bran and Catelyn both. Winifred curtsies beautifully, though Wylla's curtsy is more strained, like Arya's. The two would enjoy each other's company immensely, Catelyn inwardly joked as she and Bran greeted them both. Inside the merman's court and at his solo with his sons, Bran and Catelyn spoke with Wyman Martindale. "And how is the trading going with regards to the Cailin Canal?" asked Catelyn. "Excellently, my lady. Our revenues are 10 times higher than what they used to be," he replied. 10 times. Gods! The Cailin Canal can truly be considered a wonder of the world then, as well as a beneficial improvement to all of Westeros. Very brilliant news, Lord Martindale. "And how is the construction of our fleets going?" asked Bran. Wyman Martindale turned to his son and heir, Sir Willis. "Lord Stark, our merchant fleet has grown to 100 ships, and shipbuilders we have hired from the Iron Islands and the Arbor have helped us build a war fleet of 20 ships so far. We should expect an additional 30 by the end of the year," he replied. Bran nodded with a satisfied smile on his face. "Very fine work, Sir Willis. In fact, the results are better than I was expecting." Chapter 11, A Kraken sat on the sea stone chair. Chapter text. Theon I. Theon sat down on the sea stone chair and tiredly sighed as he relaxed. He had recently returned from a voyage to the Summer Isles, glad to be home in Pike. He had been Lord of Pike and Lord Paramount of the Iron Islands for a year, and following advice from Uncle Roderick, he had spent a year voyaging across the world to learn the life of a sea captain. When he was 3 and 10 and still warded with Uncle Roderick, 3 years after the clash of the Krakens which had killed Father, Uncle Victorian, Uncle Aaron, Roderick and Maron, Theon had been learning to be a sailor on board Uncle Roderick's ship, the Sea Song. It was Uncle Roderick's way of introducing him to a life at sea and learning the important trust shipmates had to have between one another. There are no lowborns or highborns on board a ship. Your shipmates are the ones you endure the thunder of the stormed god with. They are the ones you embrace the waves of the drowned god alongside. Before you become a captain, you must first be a sailor and understand the iron bond shipmates have between one another, because when you are out at sea, they are your family, they are your friends, and you have to rely on each other. Those were the words Uncle Roderick had taught him from a young age when he had first warded with him. Theon was happy being warded with Uncle Roderick, for he learned more with him at 10 Towers than he had in Pike, where Father was focusing more on Roderick and Maron to become fearsome captains for the mainlanders to fear when the time came to cast off the shackles. And Uncle Roderick was kinder to he and was more of a father to him than Father ever was. But Theon knew better. From his time with Uncle Roderick and traveling to the coastal towns and cities of the 7 kingdoms on board the Sea Song, Theon gained a good understanding of the mainland kingdoms of Westeros. A war with them is not one we would win, certainly not a long war. Theon. Son. Theon turned to see Mother beam at seeing him and running up to him. "Mother," said Theon, hugging her hard. But he hugged her nowhere near as hard as she hugged him. After the clash of the Krakens, Mother had fretted over losing Asher and Theon as well as Father, Roderick and Maron. Whilst she fondly remembered his brothers, he did not. He hated all his memories of his brothers, of when they beat him, of when they taunted him and humiliated him, of when they boasted to him of all that they would do when the war for Ironborn independence began and said he would do nothing significant. But that never came, when the Crows I murdered all Greyjoys in Pike, when Mother had taken Asher to Harlaw to see Theon and Uncle Roderick. "How are you?" she asked as she broke from the hug. "I am fine, Mother. Glad to be back home," he replied before kissing her forehead. She held her hand to his face. Theon felt happy to see her beaming at him. "You have the look of a proper sea captain now. Your father would be proud of you," she said. "If you say so," Theon thought as his smile slightly dimmed at the mention of father. "Theon, I know that your father didn't see much of you or your potential, but he loved you. He always did. And one day, when you see him, your brothers and your uncles again in the Hall of the Drowned God, you will feast and drink together," she said. "Or will they look down on me for my intentions for the Iron Islands?" Theon wondered as he thought about what he talked about with Uncle Roderick. Mother. "And where is Asher?" asked Theon, hoping for a change in conversation. "Here I am. Miss me, brother?" Theon turned around to see his sister, feisty and spirited as always. "How is life aboard your own ship?" she asked. "Good. Took a total of 30 prizes whilst I was out there, he replied before reaching for his sword. Whilst mother looked proud, Asher looked impressed. What prizes? Merchant ships, she asked. No. No glory in slaughtering defenseless men. It's too easy. I took 30 pirate ships. One of which was a stolen warship from the Valerius. The captain's name was Sir Oran Waters, the bastard brother of Lord Montfort Valerian. And this was his sword, a Valyrian steel sword he had taken from a Lysan warlord. I took it from him after I killed him, he explained proudly. You have a Valyrian steel sword? Mother asked, shocked. To prove it, Theon unsheathed the sword, grinning proudly as he admired the shining smoke-grey blade, the same as Uncle Roderick's sword Nightfall, earned by Harren Harlaw in the aftermath of the death of Dalton Greyjoy, the Red Kraken, and the fighting that followed during the Dance of the Dragons. It's a fine sword, brother. Though the sea dragon on the pommel looks stupid, Asher pointed out. Aye, it does. I'll take it to Dalton later and have him forge a new handle of a kraken and tentacles. I've even given it a name, said Theon. What have you called it? Mother asked eagerly. Unrelenting, he replied before passing it to Asher. A good name, Mother commented as Asher took hold of it. She whirled the sword around a few times. Like it better than your axe, sister? Asked Theon with a grin. She smirked before passing it back to him. Nah, brother. My axe and my dagger are my lord husband and my son. I'll never part from them. Though if you find some Valyrian steel ones in your travels, maybe I'll have them, she replied. My lord. Theon turned from Mother and Asher to Maester Wendermer. Though father, mother and their older children thought little of Maestas in general, their opinions changed when Maester Cullen, Wendermer's predecessor, had been tortured to death for refusing to tell the Crows where Mother and Asher were when he seized control of Pike, beginning the clash of the Krakens. There are documents for you to peruse and sign, he said. Have them brought to my solar, Maester. I'll get to work in 5 minutes, Theon replied. Yes, my lord, he said with a bow of his head. Theon turned back to Mother and to Asher, both of whom looked surprised at this. You're spending time working? Asked Asher. Aye. There is more to being Lord Reaper of Pike and Lord of the Iron Islands than merely sailing on my own ship and sailing with the Iron Fleet, Theon replied. Did your Uncle Roderick teach you this? Asked Mother. Aye, Mother, he did. One of many things he taught me. And above all, that the Iron Islands must change for good, before we drag ourselves to the Drowned God's hole for no other good reason than to be like our ancestors. The Drowned God would not want this for us. There is no logic in keeping to the old way for no other reason than it hasn't been tried hard enough before. Chapter 12, The Dragon and the Raven. Chapter text. Aegon I. And the winner is Crown Prince Aegon of House Targaryen, announced the herald. Aegon climbed down from his horse with the help of his squire, Montoris Valerian. But he was annoyed with how the small folk and the nobility cheered for him as Montoris took his helm and shield. Get me plenty of water, Montoris, and some food while you're at it, said Aegon. Yes, my prince, replied Montoris. Aegon quickly walked into his tent and sat down on his chair before he drained the contents of the first 2 cups Montoris had poured before eating the food he gave him. My prince. Aegon looked up to see Sir Oswell standing guard at the tent flap. Sir Oswell. The Lady Margaery Tyrell wishes to congratulate for your jousting, he said. Thank her for congratulations, but tell her I'm tired and wish to drink and rest, Aegon replied. Gods, with all this flattery and lickspittle behavior, do they think that that will endear me to them? Sometimes I just want a normal conversation with someone, without them treating me differently because I am the crown prince, and soon to be king. Since Aegon's 4 and 10th name-a-day, he had begun to joust under the direction of Sir Barristan Selmy and Sir Arthur Dane, much to Mother's frustration about the latter. She still had not forgiven Lord Commander Hightower, Sir Arthur or Sir Oswell for not protecting the royal family that day in the Red Keep from the murderers Clegane and Lorque. And to think, the Lannisters will try and marry Myrcella to me when they arrive in the capital for the coronation, Aegon thought angrily as Montoris took off his armor. Is all well, my prince? Asked Montoris. The heir to Driftmark was a good squire and quickly understood that there were many times in which Aegon would want peace and quiet and not suffer the annoyance of lickspittle seeking to ingratiate themselves with him. Yes, all is well. As always, Montoris, I just look forward to some peace and quiet, he replied. I am afraid, my prince, when the time comes, you will rarely enjoy such a chance, said Montoris. Oh, I know. But, if needs be, if I am taking a tour to one of the kingdoms, then that will be one of my few chances, Egon pointed out. Though, I fear, my prince, when you are crowned, every maiden lady from the north to dawn will be seeking your hand, said Montoris as he placed each armament on the mannequin. Yes, that will be the most irritating part. Is it impossible for me to want to wed out of love and not because my bride is desperate to be queen? Even if it's not out of love, I would settle for marrying someone whom isn't desperate to be queen for wealth, political power or greater influence and standing for her family. Will there be anything else, my prince? Asked Montoris. Actually, yes. Just find out whom my next opponent is, said Egon before he sat down on his chair, and sighed as he closed his eyes and tried to rest. Will my next opponent be an actual challenge? Almost every man I joust against lets me win. Is that impossible to ask for? My prince, said Montoris quietly. He is a good squire. I hope that on the day he is knighted, we can remain friends. He is one of the few people I can just be myself around and not have to play the part of the loquacious crown prince and soon to be king. Though with his eyes shut, Egon gestured him toward him. Your next opponent is Sir Lucas Blackwood, 2 hours from now, he continued, gently whispering as he came within a foot of him. 2 hours. Good. Plenty of time to get some rest. Thank you, Montoris. Wake me up when it is time, said Egon. Yes, my prince. Sir Lucas Blackwood. I have heard plenty of him. He is a very skilled jouster and also a very skilled swordsman. The second son of Lord Titus Blackwood. The Raven Knight. Gods, I hope he will be an actual challenge and not some fool whom lets me win. Lucas Lucas stretched his arms out whilst his cousin and squire, Martin Blackwood, tightened the harnesses on his black armor. His armor was as black as the color of his hair and the ravens on his house's sigil. Ever since he began to joust in tourneys and fight in melees, Lucas had used his armor to stand out from the rest of his opponents. Opponents such as Sir Loras Tyrell, the Knight of Flowers, and Sir Reynold Westerling, the Knight of Seashells. Lucas didn't care for elaborate and fancy titles or for boasting of what jousts he had won or how many opponents he had unhorsed. He cared only for the chance to prove himself a capable knight, and perhaps a place in the King's Guard. And this was his first tourney in which he was to joust against the Crown Prince himself, a moon before he was to be crowned king. Are you ready, cousin? Asked Martin. Aye. That I am, said Lucas, before he took his helm and placed it on his head. He walked to his horse as Martin brought it to him. After climbing onto his horse, Lucas took a deep breath and stroked the mane of Benjicot, whom he had named after Bloody Ben Blackwood, whom had led House Blackwood through the Dance of the Dragons, blooded the Brackens with his father at the Burning Mill and earned fame and glory alongside Oscar and Kermit Tully serving the Blacks against the Greens. Come, my friend. Let's match the might of Raventree Hall against a Targaryen king, shall we? He quietly asked before leading him onto the tourney grounds. Lucas rode to the podium where Queen Regent Elia, Queen Dowager Rolla, Prince Viserys, Princess Daenerys and Princess Rhaenys were watching. Opening his visor, Lucas bowed to the royals before his opponent rode to join alongside him. He bowed to his family before turning to Lucas. Best of luck, sir, he said with a short nod. And you, my prince, replied Lucas. Lucas shut his visor as he rode back to his tent, where he saw Martin had his lance ready as well as his shield. He took up his lance, which as always, had a band decorated around the handle and 2 black raven's feathers tucked beneath the handle. He kept these 2 feathers with him for jousting, as luck. Next, he took his shield, an escutcheon proudly bearing the weirwood tree and flying ravens of House Blackwood. It would be incredible if I do actually unhorse the Crown Prince. I'm not going to be one of those fucking morons whom let him win. Lucas took a deep breath as he looked ahead at the Crown Prince. Facing off in the final are Sir Lucas of House Blackwood of Raventree Hall, and Crown Prince Aegon of House Targaryen, loudly announced the herald. Hurry up, the suspense is making me sweat and itch. I hate itches underneath my armor. The buglers played a note loud, and Lucas rode hard towards the Crown Prince, aiming his lance squarely for the Crown Prince's shield. Lucas ignored the many cheers from the stands and viewing boxes, where all were cheering, small folk and nobility both. All for the Crown Prince. The only ones whom cheered for Lucas, he found, were his brothers, Bryndon, Hoster, Edmund, Alyn, Robert and his only sister, Bethany. Lucas looked at how the Crown Prince jousted. He was skilled, undoubtedly, but Lucas could see he was not as skilled as he appeared to be, or that people were letting him believe. He won't become a great jouster if people just let him win. Either that, or I've still got some northern spirit in my Blackwood blood to let him win. Lucas' lance struck hard onto the Crown Prince's shield and he fell back onto his horse's saddle and then down onto the ground. When he reached the other side of the tourney grounds, Lucas threw down his shield and remnants of his lance before he began to run for the fallen Crown Prince. "Oh, fuck," he heard the Crown Prince mutter. "Don't let your army of suitors hear your forked tongue, my prince." "My prince, didn't hurt you, did I?" asked Lucas. His response came as a surprise. He simply laughed as he opened his visor open. "Good jousting, sir." "Oh." Lucas held his hand out and the Crown Prince held onto it and Lucas pulled him up. The Crown Prince's squire came charging towards him. "My prince." "I'm fine, Montoris, worry not," said the Crown Prince as he took off his helm. Seeing his face, Lucas was surprised to see him grinning widely. Lucas looked up and to the herald. "And the victor is Sir Lucas of House Blackwood," he announced. The royals, Lucas was glad to see, were applauding for him. Following their example, the rest of the audience were also applauding. Lucas walked back to Benjicot, patting his neck as he watched the Crown Prince walk back to his pavilion. He rode to the royal box, where the Queen Dowager placed a crown of blue roses on the tip of his new lance. Though Lucas noticed many ladies trying to make themselves seen by him, by jutting their chests out, waving their hair around or even just waving at him, Lucas smirked. He already knew whom he was going to crown his Queen of Love and Beauty. Lucas rode to Bethany and placed the floral crown on her lap from his lance. "None are as fair as you, my dear sister," he said with a gentle smile. Lucas went back to his tent, where Martin helped him take off his armor. "Lucas. Where are you, you mad bastard?" Only one whom would address me as that, Lucas thought with a grin as Martin unfastened the greaves to his trousers. His tent flap opened to his brothers and sister. Standing in front was Bryndon, whom was grinning like an idiot. "What the fuck were you thinking? Unhorsing the Crown Prince like that?" asked Bryndon. "Why not? He'll learn something from this. All these asses before me were letting him win. If I didn't, he wouldn't learn anything," Lucas replied, defending himself. "And he should thank me for this. Worst that can happen is he holds on to a grudge, and if the Brackens decide to attack us, he'll let them get away with it." "You're a mad fool, brother, you know that, right?" Hoster asked whilst laughing. "But you did it, Lucas. You won. How much coin is that?" Edmund asked excitedly. 50,000 gold dragons, Lucas replied. "Wonder what father will use the coin for?" "Repairing the ruins at Muddy Hall and Olforge, so that Hoster and Edmund can inherit them one day." Before the Blackwoods could continue to berate him, they heard tent flap. All Blackwoods turned to see an unexpected arrival. It was a Kingsguard knight, Sir Oswell Went. Sir Oswell, though a storied Kingsguard knight and had been a member of that sacred brotherhood since before Lucas was born, it was rumored that he was not trusted by the Queen Regent for his part in the imprisonment of Lyanna Stark. "Sir Lucas Blackwood?" he asked. "Yes, sir," asked Lucas. "The Crown Prince invites you to his tent, now," he said. Lucas' brothers looked nervously from Lucas to Sir Oswell and then back to Lucas. "Yes, sir. I'll just get some more appropriate clothing on," said Lucas. "Of course," replied Sir Oswell with a gesture for him to take his time. Lucas took a doublet from Martin and quickly put it on and ran his fingers through his long hair and wiped the sweat from his brow with a lady's favor Bethany had gifted him at the start of the tourney. "Lead the way, sir," said Lucas, ready. Sir Oswell led the way from the Blackwood tent to the Targaryen tent. Lucas preferred his tent as it was small, ordinary, quaint and nothing unnecessary or impractical. But the Crown Prince's tent was the opposite of that, he saw. It was large, spacious, extravagant, and there was a small water barrel outside of the tent flap. Lucas dipped both his hands into the water and quickly wiped his hot and sweating face with them, running his hands through his sweaty hair as he did so. Lucas enjoyed wiping his face and hair with cold water. He had done ever since he first learned to swim in the Blue Fork River as a young boy. He had begun to swim at the earliest age in his family. Mother had always told him it was because of how she would go for swims in the Blue Fork when she was carrying him. Regardless, Lucas enjoyed feeling the feel of cold water on his face and going for swims in the rivers of the Riverlands. "Sir Lucas Blackwood is here at your invitation, my prince," said Sir Oswell. Lucas walked through the tent flap and saw the Crown Prince standing before a table, and he noticed that the table had 2 places to be seated down. "Sir Lucas, thank you for coming," said the Crown Prince with a beaming and welcoming smile. "It was very unexpected, my prince," Lucas replied, not knowing what else to say as the two shook hands. "Please, sit," said the Crown Prince. Lucas sat down on the closest chair whilst the Crown Prince sat at the other before a servant poured a cup of wine for the Crown Prince. "What drink will you have, my lord?" asked the servant. What do you have?" asked Lucas. "Arbor Gold, Dornish Red and Fair Market Burgundy," he replied. "Some Arbor Gold, please," said Lucas. "Of course, my lord," replied the servant. Glad you chose the Arbor Gold, I've got an abundance of it, with the Tyrells gifting me whole barrels of it," said the Crown Prince. "And what have you there, my prince?" "Dornish Red," asked Lucas. "Yes. After a wardship in Sunspear with my cousins, I've grown attached to it. More so than the local wines, or the Arbor Gold I keep getting sent," he replied before waving his hand. "But enough of that. You're probably wondering why I invited you." "I am, my prince," admitted Lucas. "Well, truthfully, I just wanted to say, thank you. Of all things this could have been about, I was not expecting that. My prince. You see, every time I joust, every fool I go up against lets me win. Even the likes of Loras Tyrell. I just wanted to have a challenge and face off against someone whom wasn't afraid to hit back," he explained. "Fair enough. Well, you'll get naught but honesty and straight talking from a Blackwood. We've still got the North in our culture, our faith and our family," Lucas thought. "Wine from the Tyrells and their favored son letting you win in tourneys. Only one conclusion one could draw from that, my prince," said Lucas, hoping that he would appreciate honesty. "Quite. It gets so annoying after a while. I used to like getting the attention from beautiful women and ladies, but now it just annoys me. Especially with those stupid smiles and co-giggles as if that will seduce me," he replied. "He sounds as if he really needs to get this all off of his shoulders. It's a risky move, my prince, to invite me so, when I could just be preying on your desire for honesty and distaste for flowery speeches to endear you to House Blackwood," said Lucas with a jesting grin. Should I be afraid of that from you, Sir Lucas?" asked the Crown Prince with a similar grin. The two chuckled before drinking from the wine cup the servant provided, filled with Arbor Gold. The Crown Prince paused to have a drink himself. Looking around, Lucas had been expecting to see an entire entourage of squires and friends with the Crown Prince, but there was no one. "If you don't mind my saying so, my prince, it's very quiet here. I hope I didn't scare away all your friends with my coming here." "No, that's all right. It's just me here. Me, my Squire Montoris, Sir Oswell and Sir Alisa," he replied, with an uncomfortable smile before looking down at his cup, as though not knowing what else to say. "By the old gods! Does he not have any friends at all? My prince. Forgive this intrusion, I just wanted to see if you were well from facing off against that Blackwood rogue." "Blackwood rogue?" Lucas turned around to see where the pretty and soft voice whom called him that was. The tent flap opened, and there was Loras and Margaery Tyrell. Lucas recognized Loras from the many tourneys he had jousted in, where he had unhorsed him thrice whereas Loras unhorsed him 6 times. It had become a contest between they and Reynold Westerling, to see whom would unhorse each other the most. Reynold Westerling had unhorsed Loras Tyrell 5 times, and Lucas had unhorsed Reynold 6 times. As for Margaery Tyrell, she very often accompanied her brother to tourneys, where he would crown her his Queen of Love and Beauty. And in this tourney, she was clearly seen where she would cheer and clap for the Crown Prince the loudest amongst all other spectators, and be the first to offer him a lady's favor. "I'm quite well, Lady Margaery, thank you for your concern. But I think that was quite rude to my guest, said the Crown Prince. The two Tyrells seemed to have noticed him for that first time since coming into the tent. Oh, Sir Lucas. My apologies, I didn't see you there, she said quickly with a charming and sweet smile. Gods, I hope she doesn't become his queen, Lucas thought. That's quite all right, my lady, said Lucas before facing the Crown Prince again. The Crown Prince shared a quick glance with Lucas as if to say, see what I mean, which Lucas grinned slightly. In spite of that, you jousted very brilliantly, my prince. Loras was just telling me, she continued. Gods, I can see why he would get bored of this shit, Lucas thought as he rolled his eyes. Thank you, Lady Margaery, said the Crown Prince before the tent flap opened. My prince, forgive me. Her Grace, the Queen Regent, is insistent on seeing you at once, said a Kingsguard, whom Lucas recognized as Sir Alisa Thorne. The Crown Prince looked relieved to have this escape from the Tyrells. Thank you, Sir Alisa. I'll be there momentarily, he said. If you'll excuse me, Sir Loras. Lady Margaery. Sir Lucas, can you come to the Red Keep this afternoon and we can finish our conversation then? Of course, my prince, said Lucas before finishing his cup. The prince finished his cup and then walked outside with Sir Alisa, closely followed behind by Lucas and the Tyrells. As he walked away, he heard Loras Tyrell behind him. I wasn't expecting to see you in the prince's tent, Lucas. Lucas turned around and saw how annoyed and jealous the two looked. Truthfully, I wasn't expecting to be invited, Loras, Lucas replied with a shrug. Might I ask how you did get invited, Sir Lucas, asked the Rose of Highgarden with a sweet smile. Oh, are you hoping to try and charm and seduce the Crown Prince? We never got around to why, my lady. You had come into the tent before I could ask, said Lucas. They looked annoyed as they walked away, which made Lucas grin as he walked back to his own tent. Chapter 13, The Wolves of Winterfell. Chapter text. Robb. Robb looked around with his Mirish spyglass. See anything, Robb? Asked Torrhen. No. It's as clear as the skull of a southern lickspittle, Robb replied as he tucked it back into his knapsack. Speaking of southerners, won't you have to put up with them when you go down south? Asked Eddard. I. Reluctantly, but I. In the last letter from Mother, she was telling how she hoped that I might be able to have a match with a Lord Paramount's daughter from the south, Robb grumbled. Fuck that shit. A southern girl. They think us all to be savages and wildlings. They've never respected the north, said Harryon. Fucking true, southern scum. Had it not been for Father and Uncle Ned in the rebellion, thousands would have died in King's Landing years ago, including the Targaryens. They should have rewarded us with more than just fucking coin and the new gift. The fact that it took them this long to award the new gift back to the North shows that they've never cared for the North. For 7 years, since his 10th Namaday, Robb had been warded to various northern houses, to make friends with the sons of the northern families he was warded with. His first was with House Mormont of Bear Island for 2 years. Then with House Umber of Last Hearth for 2 years. To have the chance of meeting Mother's family, he spent a year warded in Riverrun. And now, this was his final week of his 2 years being warded with the Karstarks of Karhold. His friends, the Karstark brothers Harryon, Eddard and Torrhen, and he had been planning on a night of drinking at their favorite taverns and brothels in Karhold, before Lord Karstark had been informed by a scout patrol that a warband of wildlings had crossed into Karstark lands, close to the village of Karlon's Birth. Just then, a Karstark scout on horseback came riding towards them. My lord, said Scout. Have you seen them? Asked Harryon, reaching for his sword as he asked. Aye, my lord. They are approaching the village now. I counted 200 of them. Led by a man wearing bones, he replied. Show us the way, Harryon commanded, unsheathing his sword as he said it. Aye, my lord, he replied, turning his horse around. Wearing bones. Only one wilderling fucker who that could be, said Torrhen. Who? Asked Robb. Called Rattleshirt by his wilderling friends. He calls himself the Lord of Bones, Eddard explained. They rode towards Karlon's Birth, with 40 men of Karhold on horseback. Spending his adolescent years with the Mormonts, Karstarks, Tullys and Umbers, Robb had learned how they all fought. The Northerners relied on speed, strength and build, whereas the Tullys relied on skill with a sword and a bow. But from his lessons with their masters at arms and with Sir Roderick Castle of Winterfell, Robb felt confident to fight the wildlings. He unsheathed a great sword sheathed in horse's saddle as they rode to a stream which led into the village itself. A bell rang furiously from the village as the wildlings appeared from a field. "Now, hurry on," asked Torren as he reached for his bearded axe and took up his shield. "Aye. Now. Before they get there. Men of Carhold. Charge." Harry on roared. Robb rode hard, holding his great sword up high, ready to cut down on the first wildlings. This wasn't the first time he fought. He had fought twice already, fighting wildlings whom had come into Umberlands when he was warded with them. Fighting alongside Small Janumber, he had killed 20 wildlings. And now would kill more. Robb roared as they came close enough to the wildlings. Eddard proudly shouted Carhold, the son of Winter, as he held up a great axe before his axe smashed into the skull of a wildling with a spear. Robb sliced across at a wildling holding up a large club. The blow severed his arms off and cut his throat. Robb stabbed one as he launched himself towards him. Then he beheaded another as he tried to stab his horse with a rusty sword. He sliced the throat of another as he rode across the warband. As they reached the other side of the warband, they turned their horses around. "Kill the fucking kneelers," came a roar from the front of them. The Lord of Bones, Robb realized when he spotted him holding up a spear made of bones and war armor decorated with the bones of men. "Fucking wildling fucker," Robb angrily thought as they charged across at them again. Robb beheaded another before he decided to turn towards their leader. Robb dodged a thrust from a spear before cutting down on the spearman. The blow eviscerated him from his shoulder to his belly. But then a club smashed onto his breastplate. Robb fell from his horse, landing onto a wildling. Robb roared as he reached for a dagger. He looked up to see a wildling took up his great sword. But as he held it up, he struggled to raise it high enough to kill him. Robb shouted Winterfell, as he launched at the thief. He stabbed him twice in the chest before taking back his sword. He sliced the throat of another wildling with his dagger. Then he caught sight of an archer shooting at Eddard, whom beheaded a wildling with his axe. Robb threw his dagger at her. The dagger stuck into her back before he took hold of his great sword with both hands. Robb sliced across at the nearest wildling, splitting him open from his shoulder to his heart. He ripped his sword out before he split another's belly open. As he fell to his knees, guts and intestines spilled out like snakes before Robb cut his head off and stabbed another, lifting him up briefly before pulling his sword out. Robb looked ahead at the Lord of Bones, whom was twisting his large spear around, as if itching to kill him. "Rattleshirt! Come here, you ugly fucker!" Robb roared. "Come then, kneeler! Come and kill me," he roared back. The wildling leader came charging at him. He thrust his spear at him. The thrust was dodged by Robb. He gripped his sword tightly as he stood upright again. Then he sliced across, chopping his head off. Robb roared and shouted as he killed another 3 wildlings before they began to retreat. Robb panted as he stabbed his sword in the ground. "Fucking 7 hells," he muttered as he reached for his waterskin. He thirstily drank from it before he saw Harry on cleaning blood off of his bastard sword, and was walking towards the village. "People of Karlon's Birth. It's safe. The wildling bastards are all gone," he yelled. Slowly, the people began to leave their homes and began to cheer when they saw the many dead wildlings. Harry turned around to his brothers and to Robb. "A fine day," he commented. "Any day is a fine day when we kill some wildling cunts," Torren replied as he ripped his axe from the skull of a dead wildling. "Sansa I. Gods, Robb has changed so much since he was last here," said Jane. Sansa rolled her eyes at her best friend staring at her older brother in this way. "Jane, that's my brother," Sansa playfully snapped. Jane giggled at Sansa's overreaction. Sansa was happy that Robb had at last finished his warding with the Karstarks and was now back home. Robb was far more different than when she had seen him last. The last time they had seen him was when he had returned from his wardship with Grandfather Hoster in Riverrun, and he had been home for 3 moons before he left for Carhold. He was now taller at 6.5 feet, very muscular and looked almost as broad as an umber, she thought. "Father. Mother," said Brandon after climbing down from his horse. "Robb, little lad. You're just taller than I." How did that happen? Father playfully asked before pulling him in for a big hug. They both laughed before Rob gently hugged Mother in comparison to the hugs Rob and Father shared. Next, he turned to Sangza. Gods, sister. You've grown since the last I saw you. How have you been? He asked. Better for seeing you, Rob, she replied. And I'm glad to hear it and to see you, he said before hugging her. Sangza looked at her other brothers, Alaric, Bern and Rukan, all of whom looked up at their eldest brother, and saw how he greeted them all first. Arya was among them, eager to hear his stories. Whilst Sangza kept to the side with her youngest sister, Lysara, whom had recently turned 7, and was only a toddler when Rob had last been at home. Inside the Great Keep, as they supped on lunch, Rob was telling them of a battle he fought against wildlings attacking a Karhold village. I slew the Lord of Bones when he clumsily thrusted his spear at me. I was exhausted at that point. I was panting as I tried to keep standing as I stabbed my sword into the ground and realized that the few wildlings left had all ran. Well done, Rob. Lord Karstark told me plenty of you in the fighting in a raven. You've done him proud and you've done us all proud, said Father before patting him on the back proudly. Father, why are there so many wildlings coming south? Asked Rukan. Because the lands beyond the wall are so covered in snow that it is hard for people to live, Rukan, my boy. So, they come south, but they come to kill northerners, and it is the duty of northern warriors, and especially of House Stark, to take the fight to them and protect our people, Father explained. Rob, your father and I have important news, said Mother. What could this be about? Mother, asked Rob. Your father and I agree that it is time that you were wed. But we wanted to speak with you regarding this before any arrangements were made with the noble house, said Mother. He looked up at Mother and then at Father. Truthfully, he knew that this was coming, but he thought that they would have chosen a bride for him. Mother. But does that mean I may choose my lady wife? Why? Is there a girl we don't know about? Father asked teasingly. No. It's just that I thought that Mother was making plans for me to wed into the family of another Lord Paramount, he explained. Your mother was thinking about that, but I decided that it would be best for you to wed to a northern lady, so that our bannermen don't think that we have abandoned them for southerners to wed with House Stark, Father explained. Rob nodded. When shall we decide on the matter? Asked Rob. Soon, Rob, I can assure you, said Mother. I hope whomever I wed is someone I will love and will enjoy life in Winterfell and life with me. How long before we focus on finding a bride for me? Rob wondered. As soon as we return from the coronation of the king, said Alaric. And what of the coronation of King Aegon? When do we go south for it? Asked Rob. 10 days from now. We will first stop at Riverrun and then go to the capital with your uncle Edmure, Aunt Barbara and your cousins Tristifer, Minissa, Benjicot and Jarjana, said Mother. But what about Grandfather Hoster? Asked Bern. Unfortunately, your grandfather is unwell, Bern. But we will wish him our best when we are there, won't we? Said Father. Yes, Father, said Bern. The coronation, Sangza thought eagerly, having heard many stories about the handsome Crown Prince Aegon, whom Uncle Eddard had rescued in King's Landing when he was only a year old. Chapter 14, Retrieving What Was Stolen. Chapter text. Asher and Roderick arrived at the tavern, where the merchant was drinking. That's him there, said Asher, nodding at a fat man in the back of the tavern, whom was paying for a drink and some food. They walked toward him. Master Burrows. Ogier Burrows looked up at them from his drink. My lords, he said, bowing his head to them. They sat down at his table. But the merchant, often sent by the Foresters to deliver their ironwood, was nervous when the 2 eldest sons of Lord Gregor Forrester sat with him. My lords, I am so sorry for what happened. It's all right, Master Burrows. We are not here to harm you or to punish you. We are here to ensure this doesn't happen again. We just want to know, where did it happen? Asked Roderick. He sighed with relief before a barmaid brought him his drink and lunch. The road to the King's Road. We were following it as we usually do when we were ambushed, at Cregan's Hill, just at the entrance to the Wolf's Wood from Winterfell, he explained. Cregan's Hill. That's not too far away from here. If we get there now with our men, we can track down the bandits, kill them and recover the ironwood. Did you see how many there were? Master Burrows? Asked Roderick. At most, I would have said 20 brigands, my lord, he replied. 20? That's not a problem. Who were they, Master Burrows? Wildlings? Mountain clansmen? Cranogmen? Or someone else? Asked Asher. Locals, by the look of them, my lord, he replied. Roderick nodded and pushed a silver stag to the merchant. We'll get your wagons back to you, Master Burrows, he said. May the old gods watch over you both, my lords, he said as they stood up and walked out of the tavern. They rejoined their men and climbed onto their horses. Did you learn anything from him, lads? Asked Uncle Malcolm. Malcolm Bramfield was the third son of Lord Burrows Bramfield, whom was killed in Robert's rebellion at the Battle of Stony September, and Malcolm's eldest brother Davin was killed at the Battle of the Trident. Soon after the rebellion's end, neighbouring houses pounced on the weakened House Bramfield of Barleyhold, where Uncle Malcolm's surviving brother, Sir Georgie, held with 100 men. Their sister, Elissa, had rode to get help and found it in the new Lord of Ironrath, Gregor Forrester, whom agreed to lead the Ironrath army to break the siege of Barleyhold. They broke the siege and liberated Barleyhold from the besiegers, the neighbouring Crown lands houses of Hayford, Byrch, Rosby and Stokeworth. And soon afterwards, Lord Gregor and Lady Elissa wed and moved together to Ironrath, joined by Uncle Malcolm, who did not want to be in Barleyhold when their neighbouring houses, whom Grandfather Burrows had once counted as his friends, turned their backs on them and wanted to divide up their lands and wealth between them at the first chance they got. Uncle. Cregan's Hill. It's about 4 miles southeast from here, just as the Wolfswood creeps onto Winterfell's lands, Roderick replied. Roderick led them from the tavern and began their ride towards Cregan's Hill. Asher, whom was the second son of Gregor Forrester, was eager to kill the bandits and recover the stolen ironwood. You don't this could have been the doing of the White Hills, do you, brother? Asked Asher. I would have been the one to ask you that, brother, considering your dalliances with Gwyn, he pointed out. Dalliances? Gods, you've been listening to Mother and Maester Ortengrin too much, Asher commented with a grin. Father still hasn't forgiven you for that, Roderick added. Him and Lud Whitehill both. Funny that. A Forrester and a Whitehill in agreement about something, Asher replied. The rivalry between the two houses had lasted centuries, in spite of efforts of both their overlord, House Glover, and their liege lord, House Stark, to mend the rivalry between the two houses whom produced ironwood for the north and the realm as a whole. And recently, with the completion of the Kalin Canal, they had been selling ironwood to various free cities whom did not grow wood of their own. Asher enjoyed riding through the Wolfswood. He liked breathing the fresh air of the Wolfswood and to feel the cold air of the north blowing through the trees. He enjoyed the outdoors more so than being indoors and the thought of being Lord of Ironrath. So have you given any thought as to what you'll do? Asked Uncle Malcolm. Uncle. Have you thought about what you might do now that your father may soon banish you? Because of his romances with Gwyn Whitehill, father was under pressure to exile Asher. Perhaps I'll join the Company of the Rose. Become a Knight of White Harbour. Or even join King Aegon's Kingsguard. That'll piss off the Whitehills to no end, Asher replied with a grin. But as he thought about it, he found the thought of being a Kingsguard more enjoyable than being a sellsword, where he wouldn't be at home in the north, or even in West Eos, and there were no Godswoods in Essos. Well, if you do join the Kingsguard, do be sure to take revenge on the bastards that backstabbed Barleyhold, Uncle Malcolm said. First thing I'll do, Uncle Asher replied with a grin. They soon came upon the site of the ambush, where Ogier Burrows' men were murdered and left lying on the side of the grounds. Looking around, Asher chuckled when he saw the tracks of men, horses and most importantly, wagons. They've reached a low point of stupidity, these fucking losers. What are you talking about, Asher? Asked Roderick. You see the tracks. Men, horses and best of all, wagons, Asher replied, pointing at these very tracks. It happened yesterday. Would they still have the ironwood? Asked Uncle Malcolm. Let's go and ask them, said Asher as he unsheathed both his sword and his axe. Asher was reckoned to be one of the best fighters in the north. He fought with a bastard sword and a bearded axe, disliking to use a shield as opposed to either of his favored weapons. When he was asked which weapon he preferred when he had begun his training under Sir Roland, he replied both, so eagerly. Their men climbed down from their horses and began following the tracks. Keep it quiet, Roderick whispered as he unsheathed his great sword. Asher kept a firm grip on both his weapons as they ventured further inside the wolf's wood. Uncle Malcolm, whom was in front, held his hand up to hold them. "Can you hear that?" he whispered. Asher listened out and he could hear voices. They crept towards an enormous weirwood tree that had been felled, crouching down and taking cover behind it. "We'll get a fortune from this ironwood. You'll see, Marvin." "Is that so?" "From wood. This is shit, Harold." "We should be taking gold," said the bandit called Marvin. "This ain't just any ordinary wood. This is the best and strongest wood in the world. Do you know how much they'll pay for this in the likes of Dawn or the Free Cities?" Should have stuck to the old ways rather than being clever and stealing ironwood, Asher thought as he shook his head once. All right. All right. "But, where will we bring the wagons?" asked Marvin. "Tomorrow, once Allard gets his lazy ass up, we take the wood with us to White Harbor, and from there, we'll find a buyer. And once we've got ourselves a buyer, we can make a nice little arrangement to take plenty of wagons of ironwood and make ourselves plenty of coin," explained Harold. Very loud-mouthed, but informative. Asher turned to Roderick, whom just nodded. They stood up and turned to the two loud bandits, whom looked at them in surprise as Asher, Roderick and Uncle Malcolm pointed weapons at them, a big and tall one and a short but stocky one. "Where is your camp?" Roderick asked. "What camp?" stupidly asked Marvin, the tall one. "Best start speaking the truth, Marvin, before I cut your balls off," said Asher. Marvin looked astonished at Asher. "How do you know my name?" he asked, puzzled. "Gods, how did these morons make it so far in life as bandits being this stupid? Let's play a little game. One of you gets to live. Whomever wants to live, lives by telling us where your camp is," Uncle Malcolm suggested. Without hesitation, both of them pointed behind them. Roderick hummed at Uncle Malcolm's effective idea. "And how many are there of you?" asked Asher. 5 and 10, part from us, milord." "Now, you won't kill us, milord." "Will you?" asked Harold. "No, we won't." "You both can go to the wall," said Roderick, before nodding to Eric, one of their men, whom grabbed them both and forced them to sit down underneath the fallen tree. "Search them for weapons and make sure they don't escape," Roderick ordered. "Aye, milord," replied Eric. Asher followed Roderick and they walked further until the voices from a clearing up ahead became louder and clearer. Peeking through the trees, Asher saw 5 and 10 men, all sitting by a campfire and drinking. "Get spread out. We attack on my command," whispered Roderick. Asher looked around as their men crept into position. These bandits didn't have any man on sentry. How is it that these bandits lasted this long without running a for of our men or any other house? Well, their luck has run aground today. Now, Roderick loudly whispered. Asher was the first to creep through the trees and with one quick slice of his axe, he beheaded a bandit whom had just been about to drink from a bottle of mead. His hand was still holding the bottle when his corpse fell to the ground, holding it up for the head that was no longer there. "Attack! We're under attack," shouted one of the bandits. Too late for that. Asher stabbed another before he could take up his weapon. Another two came running towards him, one with a sword and the other with an axe. Asher fought them simultaneously. He blocked the swordsman's overhead slice with his axe before parrying it across. Then he turned to the axeman, whom shouted as he chopped across with his axe. As his axe connected with a nearby tree, Asher cut the axe in half before stabbing him in the belly. The swordsman came towards Asher again, but Asher disarmed him with 2 quick blows from his axe and sword. Then he buried his axe onto the brigand's neck. He collapsed onto the ground, with Asher's axe stuck in his neck. Asher looked around to see Roderick pulling his sword out of the corpse of a dead bandit. He looked up at the 5 wagons loaded with ironwood that Ogier Burrows had been transporting to White Harbor. "Asher, ride back to Master Burrows and tell him that we've found his ironwood and that we'll come with him to White Harbor to ensure this doesn't happen again," Roderick called. Chapter 15, The Game Never Changes. Chapter Text. Elia v. I gather you've been spending time with your new friend. Elia was glad that Egon had another he could call a friend, when he seemingly disliked being overwhelmed with ones eager to ingratiate themselves with him, either to be a friend or to charm him into wedding them. "Yes. And, for one thing, I can rely on him to be honest with me, said Aegon as he sat in the Queen's Solar, which Elia had taken residency in once Aegon had reached the age of 4 and 10 and started making the time to do some work in the King's Solar. The work Elia and Rolla tasked him with was reading of small council sessions, correspondence between Elia and his future subjects, to gain a better understanding of one day being king. Aegon, my dear, don't mistake me. I am glad you are making new friends, especially ones whom aren't afraid to be honest with you. But I also learned from Sir Oswell and Sir Alisa that the Tyrells were eagerly trying to endear themselves to you after the tourney was won, she replied. Yes, that's true, mother, he replied with a nod. Damned Tyrells. Perhaps a royal marriage will quieten them and try and calm down their hunger for power and position. Just not quite the royal marriage that is atop in their minds currently. When it comes to choosing a bride, I want you to bear in mind all the future implications it may mean for you as king and for the stability of the realm. Many of your predecessors made this mistake when they chose to marry out of love. Think of Duncan Targaryen and Aegon V. It took a lot of work to secure your hold to the Iron Throne, and it must be that your queen be a woman whom has a powerful kingdom behind her and whose family won't backstab you once you have an heir, she said. Very grim, Mother, Aegon exclaimed with both brows raised. Indeed. But, I am afraid that is the way it is in this sordid and vile city, this capital, Elia acquiesced. There was a knock on the door. My queen. Princess Rhaenys and Princess Daenerys are here at your appointment, said Sir Lyle. Allow them in, Sir Lyle, replied Elia. So what choices are there for me? Asked Aegon as he leant in on his seat, with his elbows pressed on his kneecaps and holding his head with his hands cupped together. That is what I set your aunt and your sister to discover, said Elia before Rhaenys and Daenerys entered and sat down. My dears. What did you find out? Elia asked warmly. As far as we can tell, from the Lords Paramount of the Kingdoms, Mother, there are 6 potential choices, said Rhaenys. 6. Aegon asked, sounding frustrated with so many options. Yes, Aegon. 6. From House Tyrell, there is Margaery, whose family brings the armies of the Reach, millions in gold and grain, and the overly chivalrous nobility of the Reach, said Daenerys. The very same family that waited out the war in Storm's End and did not support Rhaegar at the Trident and did not protect the capital in its most dire hour of need. And the others? Asked Aegon. Myrcella Lannister. A very pretty, well-educated and sweet girl, innocent of the actions of her grandfather, apparently. Though possesses little understanding of the Game of Thrones, Daenerys continued. Her family would have us all believe that they are the wealthiest of all the 7 kingdoms. How quickly they use up their gold. They should find new ways to reinvent their economy before they find themselves borrowing from the Iron Bank of Bravos. Moving on, there is Shireen Baratheon. Very beautiful, intelligent and courageous also, from what I've read. She possesses a keen mind and is apparently talented at playing the Game of Thrones, said Daenerys. Shireen Baratheon. Perhaps. It would help to mend relations between our 2 houses after all Rhaegar did to crush them, leaving us to repair all the devastation he left in his wake. Next there is Alina Arryn. A bright and beautiful girl. Pretty on all accounts, but has been noted by various little birds that she enjoys the company of women as much as men, said Rhaenys. Nothing wrong that. Gods know I've enjoyed the company of plenty of girls and women in the Water Gardens, especially with Ashera, Miria and Lara. Then we have Minissa Tully. Reputedly beautiful and dutiful, as the words of her family would demand. Also said to be charitable and kind. She would be my second recommendation, said Daenerys. Good. Good. She sounds like a suitable option. Wait, did she say second? And the last one? Asked Elia. Both Aunt Daenerys and I agree on the final one being the best, Mother. She is Sansa Stark. Said to be beautiful, graceful, kind and charitable. Whilst she is reputedly not as familiar with the Game of Thrones as the likes of Margaery Tyrell or Shireen Baratheon, she is also said to be like all Northerners, in that she is honest and to the point. And is my recommendation also. Years ago, I thought that a marriage between House Targaryen and House Stark should be arranged. We may very well achieve that through Sansa Stark. If Aegon likes her. Elia hummed before turning to her son. Well, Aegon. What do you think? She asked. Egon sat up straight before turning to his sister and aunt. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt until I meet them face to face. At the first feast, once all are present, I shall dance with each of them to gain a good understanding of them, and perhaps you both dance with their brothers and learn about them also, he said. Good thinking, Elia thought proudly. Brandon 3. It's not often we come to Riverrun, Brandon thought as they crossed the drawbridge and then rode into the courtyard of the Great Hall, where Ed Muir stood with his beautiful and voluptuous wife, Barbara Bracken, and their 5 children. Brandon looked at his Tully nephews and nieces. The eldest 2 were twins at 14, Tristifer, the second in line to Riverrun, and Minissa, whom had a reputation as one of the fairest maiden ladies of the Riverlands. Then there was Benjicott, a boy of 9 whom had recently finished squiring for Lord Jason Mallister. Jarjarina, whom had recently turned 5 and was beaming happily at seeing her Stark cousins. And then there was Kermit, half a year old and resting in his mother's arms. Sister. Brandon. Welcome one and all to River.